Chapter 856. The former site of the Chen clan was the Painting Mountain. For hundreds of years, the Chen clan, with its prosperous population and talented people, had been one of the top 7 sword-holding families. But it was also the family that suffered the most when Li Tianlan swept across Beihai. The captives of the Li family captured by the Chen clan at that time completely infuriated Li Tianlan. One sword split the mountain. The towering platform of the Chen clan was smashed by Li Tianlan. Since then, the status of the Chen clan among the 7 sword-holding families plummeted and could not recover to its former glory. Today, the Chen clan temporarily moved to a manor on the outskirts of the port of Tongtian. Although it was still luxurious, it was completely different from the past. The divine weapon of the 13-story building was inserted in the former site of the Painting Mountain. Under the dark night, the divine weapon stood quietly on the top of the barren Painting Mountain, bathed in the moonlight, looking cold and proud. The black shadow stood in front of the divine weapon, its cuff gently touching the hilt of the divine weapon. The blade of the divine weapon had a touch of blood-like red, which looked shocking. The black shadow's cuff slowly rubbed, feeling the energy of the divine weapon recovered in 2 years, and the motionless figure looked more and more quiet. The energy of the divine weapon gradually recovered, lit up little by little. The light enshrouded the entire sword, and the delicate sword looked extremely strange. The red light completely enveloped the black shadow and the sword. After a long time, the black shadow slowly took a step forward. The divine weapon still stood there, but the sword intent was much weaker than before. The black shadow, who had been silent, patted the divine weapon as if to say hello. Its cuff fell down, and the figure disappeared instantly. The gradually absorbed energy began to make its will clearer and clearer. His actions gradually got rid of the most primitive instinct. He had a lot of things to do tonight. Kanglin. Choshui had the sky, Tongtian had the divine weapon, Kanglin had the void, the floating island had the shadow, and Liuli had the horizon. The Empress had the East Emperor, and Xianxia had the judgment. Just like Qingzhou had the broken heart. It could clearly feel the state of every sword in the entire Beihai province. The black shadow kept flashing in the night sky, from south to north. Without the bright sword light across the sky of Jianghu state, its arrival seemed extremely low-key. In the darkest time before dawn, the transport plane from Tiannan to Beijiang approached the desert. The black shadow that was patrolling the North Sea also stepped into Shenzhou City and stood in front of Ruling Sword. No one in the Wu family, who was on guard 24 hours a day, discovered its existence. Judgment's energy, which was like a sword intent, was slowly absorbed by it. To some extent, such an approach was tantamount to the murderous weapon accumulating energy for itself. His hand left the hilt of verdict. The judgment sword trembled slightly, and its light dimmed a lot. A faint arc of light flashed in the dark space. An old man with white hair suddenly appeared in front of Ruling Sword. He carefully stared at the verdict in front of him. His eyes were solemn and he was silent for a long time. The black shadow casually glanced at him and ignored him. This old man was very strong. He seemed to have noticed the change in Judgment Sword's aura and rushed over. But to the black shadow, it was meaningless. Meaningless meant that there was no threat. The black shadow slowly rose into the air. The night was dark. The black windbreaker fluttered in the air, completely blending into the deep night. He stood above Ruling Sword and looked in the direction of Mount Dibbing. Under the black hood, the face that was not handsome but extremely perfect gradually revealed a somewhat puzzled expression. It knew there was another sword on Mount Dibbing. But now it couldn't sense the specific state of that sword. It frowned. An invisible wave with pure energy kept spreading toward Mount Dibbing. It was windy in the North Sea. The wind moved the sea and blew up the waves. The surging tide beat on the cliff of the stage of Formidable Person. The sword energy, which was as majestic as the starry sky, rose with the sea and moved with the wind. It brought an extremely vague tide in the void, isolating everything on the stage of Formidable Person in an instant. Everything on the stage of Formidable Person. Wang Xiangxiao sat in front of the stone of Formidable Person, immersed in the deepest level of meditation. His heart was extremely quiet and joyful. This feeling was indescribable. There seemed to be a road leading to the end of martial arts in front of him. He ran forward crazily on the road, all the way, without stopping or hindrance. He had a panoramic view of all the scenery along the way. Every sprint under his feet was on the ground. He made rapid progress. As he was enveloped by the tide, he could feel every single tremble of the sword energy. It was like a chosen one standing at the end of martial arts was standing in front of him, constantly waving his sword when his heart was at its most tranquil. Little by little, the chosen one imparted his sword intent to him without any reservation. Grand, subtle, whole, scattered, everything, without any reservation. The sword energy at the end of martial arts was almost put in pieces in front of him for him to learn, improve, and imitate. What Xianxia felt was only progress. That was a kind of progress that was almost crazy. In the final maneuver 2 years ago, he lowered his realm and made him leave the peak of the thunder-shocking realm for a long time. It also brought him great gains. When Eastern Europe was in chaos, he was once again close to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. At this time, the road ahead was completely clear. He didn't have to explore by himself. The only thing he could do was to sprint. So he re-entered the peak of the thunder-shocking realm as soon as possible. This was a realm that he was once very familiar with. This could not even be called a breakthrough. The distant and supreme sword chi pulled him along as he kept charging forward. No one knew that in this short time, Xianxia had officially broken through the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and entered the half-step invincible realm. Xianxia was 27 years old this year. When most of his peers were still struggling to enter the fire-flaming realm from the ice-condensing realm, he broke through the threshold of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and was only one step away from the real invincible realm. At the age of 27, he had the wind and thunder veins and the top inheritance of Beihai. He was a half-step invincible realm expert. Xianxia didn't tell anyone the news. He completely suppressed everything about himself, quietly waiting for the outbreak of the war, waiting to give everyone a surprise. What did it mean to be a half-step invincible realm expert with the wind and thunder veins? Xianxia could be sure that his current realm might still be a little unstable, but he should not be weaker than Jianghu before he broke through the invincible realm. That was to say, no matter which era, he could stand at the peak of the invincible realm. At this level, he might still be at the bottom, but he was also one of the youngest people. The real invincible realm was within reach. The only thing that stood in his way was his age, or rather, his physical quality. He still chose to meditate on the stage of formidable person every day. The incredible sword energy became clearer and clearer in front of him. His realm didn't change, but his understanding of sword energy and sword intent was getting stronger every moment. He also gradually understood what he was going to do. The long night didn't end. The dawn hadn't arrived. Xianxia, who was meditating, slowly opened his eyes. With him as the center, all the sword energy that he had condensed for a whole night began to spread out without reservation. The thick sword energy tide in the distance whistled over with the wind and tide. Xianxia looked ahead. It was snowing in Xianghu. The heavy snow was dancing in the sea breeze and the whistling sword energy. Xianxia took a deep breath and carefully controlled his sword energy, slowly merging it with the tide of sword energy. Bit by bit. The process was slow, but it was extremely smooth. The moment the sword energy touched the tide, the momentum of the tide suddenly weakened a lot, and Xianxia's aura became a lot stronger in an instant. The increase and decrease seemed to be perfect. But a gap suddenly appeared in the perfect sword energy that covered the stage of formidable person. A gap that most people, including experts of the invincible realm, could hardly detect. Xianxia slowly relaxed, and then suddenly opened his eyes in shock. In the sky above Xianghu, the black windbreaker fluttering in the night suddenly straightened. The gorgeous wind. The windbreaker seemed to be frozen in the night sky in an instant. Under the black hood, Li Tianlan's somewhat illusory face suddenly became extremely real. He looked in the direction of Mount Dibbing, and for the first time, there was a touch of emotion in his deep eyes. It looked like anger. The anger was very light, but there was a kind of fierceness and killing intent in it, as if the world was falling apart. The wind and snow in Xianghu grew stronger. The world became colder. On the black windbreaker, the complicated golden patterns began to shimmer. His figure directly appeared in the night sky from the most illusory state. The old man who was observing the judgment suddenly looked up at the black shadow floating above him. His body was stiff. In the sky full of killing intent and wind and snow, he couldn't say a word. The black shadow in his sight was so clear. He could feel its anger and killing intent. It floated in the air, like a real emperor. Those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die. The tide and sword energy on Mount Dibbing merged. The silver moon on the stone of formidable person trembled slightly. Above Xianxia, the black shadow floated up for a moment. Among the old man underground, his figure flickered and disappeared instantly. In a trance, the darkness dissipated. The entire Xianxia city saw the light. The colorful sword light was more dazzling than the scorching sun. The sword light tore an arc of tens of thousands of meters long over Xianxia. It cut the night sky and seemed to bring dawn and morning. The next second, it appeared directly over Mount Dibbing. At the moment when the day and night alternated, a rainbow appeared in the sky. The rainbow spanned Xianxia and Mount Dibbing. The sword intent was mighty and earth-shattering. The rainbow-like sword light didn't destroy any building on Mount Dibbing, but rushed to Mount Dibbing. Heaven and earth became extremely illusory and stiff in an instant. Only the sword light flew and froze the world. The killing intent was majestic. Wang Xiangxiao suddenly stood up. The merged sword energy disappeared instantly. His aura declined. The tide of sword energy returned to its peak state in the blink of an eye. The sword energy covered the stage of formidable person again. The rainbow, like the light from beyond the sky, didn't stop at all. It hit the tide of sword energy without hesitation. Dawn broke in the sky. The entire Mount Dibbing heard a dull thunder-like noise. The sword energy that could tear everything was drawn into the deep sea. Giant waves surged wildly. At that moment, Wang Xiangxiao looked back at Beihai. The sea and the sky were no longer in his line of sight. Giant waves hundreds of meters high occupied everything in his sight and completely covered the sky. The entire Mount Dibbing was shaking crazily. Only the tide of sword energy continued to gather in the giant waves and wind and snow. Wang Xiangxiao slowly turned his head. In front of him, under the dawn sky, a black windbreaker lightly floated in the air, without the slightest hint of smoke or fire. It slowly lifted its cuffs. The majestic sword energy covered the sky and covered the earth, like the scorching sun. This is a misunderstanding. Wang Xiangxiao took a deep breath and said slowly. The black shadow raised its palm and looked at Wang Xiangxiao. I can guarantee that this won't happen again. You can take the silver moon away at any time. Wang Xiangxiao said, It's really a misunderstanding. The black shadow carefully felt the state of the silver moon and then looked at Wang Xiangxiao. Wang Xiangxiao was motionless. After a long time, the sword energy in the sky slowly dissipated. The black shadow slowly turned around, flashed, and disappeared instantly. In the horizon. That direction was the direction of Beijiang. Wang Xiangxiao narrowed his eyes and watched the black shadow disappear. He was silent for a long time. An invisible sword energy suddenly appeared in the wind and snow. It blended into the tide of sword energy and was extremely harmonious. Wang Xiangxiao smiled and said expressionlessly, Don't worry, my promise is still valid. He looked at the direction where the black shadow left and said lightly, It will belong to us soon. Chapter 857. The morning sun illuminated the endless desert, the dense camps on the desert, the cabin of the plain, and Lin Youxian's eyes. The edge of the defensive line could be vaguely seen in the distance. The plane had already arrived above the capital of Beijiang. Looking down from above, all the troops in the Beijiang military region seemed to have received an extremely tough order. The traffic police, together with some other police officers, began to strictly block the traffic in the cities of Beijiang. A large number of troops gathered and charged towards the direction of the desert. The transport plane flew over half of Beijiang province. In every city, Lin Youxian could see mighty troop carriers sprinting in one direction. The unusual movement of Emperor Dong's palace attracted the close attention of the high-level officials of Jianghu state. The Beijiang military region also responded in the shortest time possible. The military commander, Huang Tong, personally gave the order. The special forces of the northern border military region, codenamed Wasteland, immediately headed to the desert and began to set up the fifth line of defense for the desert prison. Following that, two more armies set off one after another. The total number of people in the Beijiang military region was about 120,000. From the beginning of the blockade until now, more than 100,000 people had been mobilized in the Beijiang military region in a day. Now the defense line of the desert prison had increased from 4 to 6, and the total number of people had approached 80,000. The 80,000-strong army was filled with people. Countless supplies, armaments, and resources were being consumed at a crazy rate. The council remained silent on all of this. From the beginning to the end, the council had never contacted Emperor Dong's palace. This kind of silence often represented determination. In the face of the rampant arrogance of Emperor Dong's palace, the only choice for Jianghu state was to send more troops. If you dare to come, I will dare to fight. It was clear and thorough. The only response from Emperor Dong's palace was no response. The two transport planes carrying most of the combat power of Emperor Dong's palace moved forward and finally approached the capital of Beijing at dawn. 80,000 people. In the extremely quiet cabin, Lin Youxian's voice sounded softly. He turned around and looked at the elites of Emperor Dong's palace in the cabin. Everyone had woken up from their meditative state. Everyone's face was calm. Lin Youxian takes a deep breath. His voice resounded throughout the cabin. Everyone, there is no turning back now that we're here. There was no turning back. Their actions were blatant. But Jianghu state had always ignored this. 80,000 people. 80,000 soldiers of Jianghu state. Whether it was their statuses or their numbers, they gave off a suffocating pressure. But there was no turning back. Emperor Dong's palace came here. If they returned to Tiannan now, Jianghu state might not look into it, but the entire Emperor Dong's palace would become the laughingstock of Jianghu state and the dark world. Everything they had now, everything they built, and everything they had imagined would become a complete joke. Less than 2,000 elites faced an army of 80,000 led by an invincible realm expert with a murderous weapon. It will be very difficult for us to win. Lin Youxian whispered, but we must win. If we lose, we will die. He smiled. Everything is very simple now. 200 kilometers ahead of us is the desert prison. Either we kill our way through or we die in the desert. Some of you have not been in Emperor Dong's palace for a long time, and the time you spent in the Nightmare Core is even shorter. You have imagined the future and faced crises. Now, I don't know how many of you will regret it, but I want to say that this is the decision of Emperor Dong's palace. You can regret it, but you can't quit, because none of us, including me, are qualified. So get ready. We expect to be there in half an hour. Then it will be war. Life and death. Take care, everyone. Still no one spoke. But everyone picked up their weapons. The cabin was shining with the light of guns and cold weapons. Lin Youxian looked at all this, and he became calmer. A communication with high authority suddenly lit up. The next second, before Lin Youxian could connect, the gloomy and majestic face of Huang Tong, the commander of the Beijing military region, had appeared on the screen. In a neat military uniform and a bright red star chess, Huang Tong sat quietly in the huge office. He looked directly at Lin Youxian through the screen, as if he were looking at everyone, and said word by word, "Do you know what you are doing?" No one spoke, including other high-level officials in Emperor Dong's palace. Lin Youxian's voice was calm, and he asked, "What about you?" He narrowed his eyes slightly. "Do you know what you are doing?" "Treason." Huang Tong's roar suddenly came through the screen, deafening. "You are all elites of Jianghu state. Jianghu state trained you not to let you attack the army of Jianghu state. In front of you are nearly 100,000 soldiers of Jianghu state. What do you want to do? Kill them? What is Jianghu state in your eyes? What is the military in your eyes? What are the resources that Jianghu state has consumed to train you?" The cabin was still quiet. Everyone bowed their heads and sorted out their weapons, without saying a word. Some of them might have regretted it, but as Lin Youxian said, they were not qualified to quit. Since they joined Emperor Dong's palace, they naturally had to obey the decision of Emperor Dong's palace. What is the military in your eyes? What is an army of 100,000 soldiers in your eyes? Lin Youxian sneered. If you let them block our way now, you are letting them die. You don't have to deny it. No one can deny it. You are a high-level officer of Jianghu state. Do you think the high-level generals of Jianghu state will only send their subordinates to die? That's what they should do. Huang Tong gritted his teeth. His mind was a little confused, and his words were a little out of proportion. He might have meant to say that soldiers should obey orders, but in the ears of most people, this sentence was obviously saying that sending them to their deaths was what they should do. Huang Tong didn't realize this. Lin Youxian did not correct him. He just nodded and said, "Everyone has their own things to do and must do, so it doesn't make sense to say anything else. Huang Tong looked at him and was silent for a long time. Now, on behalf of Emperor Dong's palace, I ask you to make way. General Huang, the kindness of Emperor Dong's palace is never cheap. I hope you can think it over before making a decision. I will give you 5 minutes. Lin Yuxian looked at Huang Tong's eyes and said calmly. Huang Tong laughed. His facial muscles twitched and looked a little ferocious. Now, I can also give you 5 minutes. On behalf of Jianghu State, I warn you for the last time that your current behavior is very dangerous. Now, I ask you to return immediately and go to where you should go. I hope you can think it over. My army is in front of you. Once you take action, it will be treason. He paused, and his cruel smile looked a little meaningful. I promise that Jianghu State will remember the name of every traitor and your family. The atmosphere in the cabin seemed to have changed slightly. Lin Yuxian laughed. His smile suddenly became extremely bright. You remind me. His voice was soft. The plane flew over the capital of Beijing and officially entered the desert. The last line of defense at the edge of sight began to become clear. What? Huang Tong frowned. He frowned. Nothing. Lin Yuxian said faintly. I want to remind you that even if Emperor Dong's palace really fails as you expected, it will not fall. At the very least, even if Emperor Dong's palace really disappears, I will not die. He looked at Huang Tong's eyes and said softly, Remember my name. I am Lin Yuxian, the former heir of the Lin clan. Huang Tong stared at him, and his heart kept sinking. This is not a threat, Lin Yuxian said softly. Lin Yuxian said softly. His gentle eyes were very clear, but with a touch of incomparable ferocity. No matter what happens this time, I will kill your whole family within a week. Huang Tong's face was livid, but there was a touch of panic that could not be concealed in the depths of his eyes. Lin Yuxian did not wait for his answer. He directly hung up the communication and looked in the direction of the cockpit. His voice could be heard from afar. Advance 40 kilometers and prepare to land. 40 kilometers ahead. There was no airport. There was only a desert. At this moment, the atmosphere in the entire cabin became extremely crazy. The transport plane went all the way forward. Lin Yuxian stood in place and was silent for a long time. Then he took out his mobile phone and dialed a video call. The video was transmitted for a long time before it was connected. On the screen, a gloomy and indifferent face appeared in front of Lin Yuxian. Lin Yuxian looked at him quietly. To be exact, with his current identity and strength, he was actually not qualified to dial the other party's video call. The other party was willing to answer, mostly for the sake of the Lin clan. He had only seen the other party once outside of the news. This was the second time. However, it was different from the amiable expression he had last time. This time, his gaze was teasing, and it carried a wisp of disappointment and coldness that seemed to be there. Lin Yuxian narrowed his eyes and slowly said, I can solve the problems of Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. It's not too late to stop now. How? In the video, Chen Fengqing's gloomy voice sounded. Balance. Lin Yuxian's voice was calm and indifferent. Tianlong didn't promise you, but I can. Li Huaqing and Chen Fengqing wanted Li Tianlong to replace Kunlun City. Li Tianlong did not refuse, but he did not choose to agree either. And Lin Yuxian could agree for himself and Zhuan Yuantai. I'll replace Kunlun City, Lin Yuxian said. This was the new balance. The new Zhuan Yuantai stood in Jianghu State. The new god of war came out of nowhere. He could watch over Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai and balance each other. Chen Fengqing was silent for a long time. This plan was actually very good. Although Lin Yuxian was immature now, his future was promising. However, if this plan really became a reality, what was the point of what he was doing now? He was now sure of victory. What reason did he have to accept this seemingly good balance? Wouldn't it be better if the hidden danger could be solved directly? You're not qualified to talk to me about this, Chen Fengqing said with a poker face. You can take this as a notice. I'm not going to talk to you. I'll replace Kunlun City. You can't stop me, and Kunlun City can't stop me. The huge body of the transport plane began to descend in the desert. Chen Fengqing's sneer sounded. Just by yourself? I'll prove it to you. Lin Yuxian finished the last sentence and directly hung up the video. Chapter 858. The screen suddenly went black. The spacious office seemed to have lost all the light and suddenly became extremely dark. The thick curtains were tightly drawn, isolating the light from the outside world. In the office without lights on, Chen Fengqing sat on the sofa. His face was gloomy and even cold. Lin Yuxian said he would prove it to him. How? What did he use to prove? What did he want to prove? Recalling the conversation between the two, Chen Fengqing was silent for a long time. The blue veins on his temples twitched slightly. His headache seemed to be getting worse recently. He stretched out his hand and rubbed his temples with some trembling. After a long time, he said expressionlessly, Jianghu state is the most powerful country in the world. Since when does a young man who wants to develop in Jianghu state, dare to be so rude to me? He paused, and his hoarse voice became more and more gloomy and deep. Why is he so rude to me? Li Huaqing, who was sitting opposite him, glanced at him and said indifferently, everyone has something they need to protect. His domineering attitude right now is understandable. Chen Fengqing was not the only one in the office. There were 3 people. Li Huaqing sat opposite Chen Fengqing. The other one was Hua Zhangyang, the vice prime minister of Jianghu state and one of the academics. At this moment, Hua Zhangyang glanced at him. His eyes flickered but he did not speak. Something to protect? Chen Fengqing sneered. He is a member of the Lin clan. Is Li Tianlan something he must protect? Or Emperor Dong's palace something he must protect? Qin Weibai. Li Huaqing said flatly. He must protect the patriarch of the Lin clan. Not only him, but the entire Lin clan must protect him. The structure of the Lin clan is very different from that of the Wang family of Beihai. Their headquarters will not choose to centralize power. The patriarch has a very high position in the entire Lin clan. The blockade began last night, and today is the 2nd day. Lin Yuxian appeared in the desert. Next, in the shortest time, the branches of the Lin clan scattered all over the world will take action and put pressure on Jianghu state. Because their patriarch is trapped in the desert, they must show the attitude they should have. He stared at Chen Fengqing and said word by word, the situation is so chaotic. Do you still want to involve the entire Lin clan? The Lin clan was very strong. The whole world knows about it. The Lin clan was very scattered. This was also something that the entire world knew. But just because they were scattered didn't mean they couldn't be united. The relationship between the Lin clan and the major branches had always been subtle. It seemed to be aloof, but in fact, they watched each other. The headquarters of the Lin clan was located in Switzerland and stood aloof from worldly affairs. It coordinated the relationship between the major branches and provided military support to the headquarters. For the major branches, it was like a leader who did not intervene in specific affairs, but everyone recognized such a leader. After Qin Weibai became the patriarch of the Lin clan, she did not change the rules in this regard. She had not been the leader of the Lin clan for a long time, but she had already been recognized by most of the branches. This kind of acknowledgement was not just for show. This meant that more than half of the Lin clan had accepted the new patriarch. And when the clan leader was trapped, or even sealed, imprisoned in the desert, this sort of acknowledgement had to be displayed with sufficient strength. He had to show enough strength. Because she was the leader of the entire Lin clan. Therefore, as Lin Yuxian took action first, the major branches would unite and exert great pressure on Jianghu state in different fields. No one was willing to let a behemoth like the Lin clan participate in today's chaos, because no one knew what kind of result their entry would have on the situation. Li Huaqing was unwilling, and neither was Chen Fengqing. But no matter how unwilling he was, he couldn't express his position. There was only one way to make the Lin clan withdraw. Take Qin Weibai out safely. But Chen Fengqing would not do that unless he was crazy. Qin Weibai was the patriarch of the Lin clan. She was Qin Weibai's woman, and she used to be the planner of all the plans of the Samsara palace. If such a woman was let out, the consequences would be even more serious than letting Li Tianlan out directly. She might set up a trap casually, and countless people might be killed. When individual force did not reach the point where it could reverse the general trend, wisdom was often more important than force. So this option did not exist in Chen Fengqing's mind at all. The only thing he could do was to brace himself to resist the pressure of the Lin clan and solve the countless troubles in front of him as soon as possible. I have no choice. Chen Fengqing gritted his teeth. Li Huaqing looked at Chen Fengqing's face and sighed with emotion. He had known him for many years. There was no way around it. He had been saying these words more often than he had in the past few years. That young man's suggestion might be a way to solve the problem. Li Huaqing suddenly said, "Are you tempted?" Chen Fengqing was shocked. Raising his head, he looked at Li Huaqing with hostility in his eyes. "Since there's nothing we can do, we can only compromise. It's not good for anyone to make a big scene. At least he's right about one thing. It's not too late to turn back now." Li Huaqing said calmly. At the very least, he hadn't caused too serious or irreconcilable enmity yet. If he stopped now, there were many things that could be discussed. "It's too late." Chen Fengqing grinned and laughed somewhat crazily. "It's too late. I have nowhere to retreat. If I stop now, what's the point of everything I've done? If he stopped now, then what about those who had been sacrificed in the North Sea? It may be a new balance to let Lin Yuxian replace Kunlun City, but who can be sure that this is not inviting a wolf into the house?" With red eyes, he looked at Li Huaqing. "The most important thing is that although the situation is chaotic, I haven't lost yet. The Beijiang military region has mobilized more than 100,000 troops. Gu Qianchuan has a murderous weapon. How can I lose?" "So?" Li Huaqing asked. "This is a war." Chen Fengqing lowered his eyelids. Li Huaqing nodded and said lightly, "Remember, this is your war, not mine or Jianghu state's." Chen Fengqing did not speak. This was the inevitable result. When he took over the leadership of this matter, there would be such a result. If he won, it would be his credit. If he lost, it would be his sin. Li Huaqing stood up and walked out of the office. Hua Fengyang also stood up and followed him out. When he was about to reach the door, Li Huaqing's figure suddenly paused and asked, "Can we meet again?" Chen Fengqing lowered his head and listened to Li Huaqing's clear statement. He laughed, somewhat self-deprecating and a little crazy. "Of course," he said lightly. "I can't fail." Li Huaqing nodded and closed the office door. It seemed that from this moment on, Li Huaqing and Chen Fengqing, the two giants who had brought great pressure to North Sea and the giant group, officially parted ways. Li Huaqing's eyes were calm. This was a war, but no matter what the result was, it would have nothing to do with him. This was not his weakness. He just felt that when the situation was really chaotic and was about to get out of control, there must always be a person who kept sober to clean up the final mess. Chen Fengqing did not have such sobriety, nor did Wang Xianxia. He shook his head and sighed. Chapter 859. The large transport plane was getting closer and closer, flying lower and lower. It was busy everywhere in the desert. The plane landed savagely. The base was being built crazily. In the entire northern borderline military region, the Yellow Sand Corps could not be considered a top-notch army. The Yellow Sand Corps was organized as a division, and it had a passable size of over 9,000 people. The senior colonel with the code name Sand Tiger had passable capabilities, and the quality of the soldiers in the corps was passable. All these factors added together allowed the Yellow Sand Corps to maintain its position in the northern borderline military region. When the entire Beijiang military region began to be mobilized, the Huangsha Corps naturally received the order. But they were not the top troop after all. And they set off late and in a hurry. When they arrived at the destination, the transport plane of Emperor Dong's palace had already appeared in front of them before they could finish the basic fortifications. The roar of the transport plane was loud and dull, sounding extremely domineering. In the eyes of all the people in the Huangsha Corps, two huge objects swooped down like goshawks from the sky, without any reservation or hesitation. Looking at the scene in the sky, countless people turned pale. Every soldier knew who they were stopping. The heavenly sons locked in prison. Those influential figures in the southern heaven region were like clouds and rain with a flip of their hands. The Emperor Dong's palace that was gradually rising to the peak of Jianghu state. All of these were not what these ordinary soldiers could afford to provoke, nor were they willing to face. But military orders were absolute. They had already arrived here, and they had just found their footing when they encountered the enemy they didn't want to encounter the most. This was a war. If this was a war, How many people in the Xianxia Corps would die? This time, people were really going to die. They were going to die because of the so-called general trend that an ordinary soldier could not understand. No one resented Emperor Dong's palace. Because this was an enemy they couldn't resist. They only had nervousness and fear in their hearts. But at this moment, everyone resented Huang Tong. This commander used the most ordinary troops to stop the most powerful armed forces of Emperor Dong's palace. It was obvious that he was sending them to their deaths. The plane was getting closer and closer. The huge outline was shining in the sunlight, making it hard for people to look at it directly. The chaos in the Xianxia Corps was gradually expanding. Report. Report. Emperor. Emperor Dong's palace. In the stammering voice, a soldier quickly ran to Jianghu, the commander of the Xianxia Corps, with a pale and anxious face. In the middle of the camp, Sand Tiger looked up at the sky in silence. There was no need for any report at all. The direction in which the two transport planes were landing was clear and definite. As long as one was not blind, they would be able to see their destination. Sand Tiger was silent for a moment. His gloomy face was tinged with fear and anger as he whispered, F***CK. It was as if he had won the lottery. Everyone knew that it was impossible for the transport planes of Emperor Dong's palace to have a special landing place. The military region of Beijing would not allow them to land at the military airport. Naturally, the civil aviation did not dare to make it convenient for Emperor Dong's palace. Therefore, their landing place could only be random. If ordinary people did this, they would be courting death, but it was not difficult for the masters of Emperor Dong's palace to do this. However, Sand Tiger did not expect the other party to land right in front of his camp. 20 kilometers to the south was the encampment of another legion. The two legions formed the sixth line of defense. Originally, they were not under much pressure, because many people thought that Emperor Dong's palace would directly fly over the back lines of defense and rush to the desert prison, or at least to the core of the 43rd Division. But now, Emperor Dong's palace began to descend from the outermost area and landed in front of them. Their combat capability was not worth mentioning in front of the Nightmare Troop, which was now famous in the Dark World. Commander, it is said that some anti-air weapons in the front lines have been set up, so... A deputy walked over and said with a solemn expression. The military region of Beijing naturally had anti-air weapons. They were similar to anti-aircraft guns, and they even had exclusive fighter jets and armed helicopters. No one would doubt the determination of Jianghu State. That was why Emperor Dong's palace decided to land here? But most of the weapons facilities here were not ready. It was impossible for the rear to not know this, but so far, he had not received any support, not even the latest order. What was this? Did they really send them here to die? Wait. F***CK them. Sand Tiger gritted his teeth and could not help but curse. Anyone who was used as cannon fodder would feel bad. Commander. The roaring transport planes were flying lower and lower. Sand Tiger's eyes were red, but the troops were already here, and it was too late to retreat. He suddenly turned his head and said angrily, Commander? What commander? The enemy is already at the door. Should I teach you how to fight a war step by step? Open fire, use whatever you have. Blast those bastards to pieces for me. The deputy froze for a moment. Sand Tiger's voice had been suppressed to the extreme. I said fire. This is war. The deputy took a deep breath, and his face was obviously timid. His face was clearly timid, and his hands were trembling as he saluted. He slowly turned around, looked at the approaching transport plane, and suddenly said, Aim at the enemy, fire! There was no leeway, no discussion, no concession. Emperor Dong's palace had already made its attitude clear. It was useless to say more. What was Jianghu State afraid of? The transport planes cast a huge shadow on the desert. In the yellow sand core, the first gunfire suddenly roared. Then a large number of cannonballs shot straight into the sky, like fireballs under the scorching sun. Sand Tiger stared at the two transport planes in the air. The sun and the cannonballs crisscrossed in the air. At that moment, the whole sky seemed to be blurred for a moment. In Sand Tiger's perception, countless sword energy suddenly broke out in the transport planes. Obviously, the sword energy did not belong to the same person intertwined and formed a pseudo-domain similar to the invincible realm in an instant. The pseudo-domain directly wrapped the two transport planes. The falling speed of the transport planes suddenly slowed down for a moment, and then became slower and slower. The cannonballs all over the sky bombarded the pseudo-domain. The space was turbulent and distorted in a shape visible to the naked eye, and the surging explosion drowned everything. The speed of the transport planes was getting slower and slower, and finally almost stopped. Everyone could only watch as the two unimaginably heavy transport planes descended bit by bit in a strange manner. They could only launch endless artillery fire in vain. In Sand Tiger's sight, the space of the pseudo-domain slightly fluctuated for a moment. Then, one figure after another appeared in the pseudo-domain. Everyone was surrounded by electric arcs, exuding a surging aura. Sand Tiger's eyes swept over them one by one. Every one of them was a thunder-shocking realm expert. They belonged to the thunder-shocking realm experts of Emperor Dong's palace. Although there were not many of them, their young faces were enough to make people feel awe from the bottom of their hearts. The leader of the group of thunder-shocking realm experts was Lin Yuxian. He was the commander of the Nightmare Army, which almost everyone in Tiannan knew. The two commanders looked at each other across the air for a moment. Sand Tiger saw the corner of Lin Yuxian's mouth move, and he seemed to smile. The pseudo-domain, which was a little fuzzy and seemed to be barely able to maintain the two transport planes, suddenly expanded, spread, and then began to distort. The transport planes, which were almost deformed, fell down and moved forward. One by one, the elites of the Nightmare Army jumped down from the open cabin door. The cannonballs all over the sky were deafening. Lin Yuxian suddenly raised his palm. With his movement, everyone raised their palms at the same time. Sand Tiger's face changed dramatically, and he suddenly roared, "Everyone, retreat!" Chapter 860. No one retreated. Not because of the bravery of the Yellow Sand Corps, but because it was too late, or they couldn't react. When Sand Tiger shouted this sentence, it was too late. The dense artillery fire was still whistling in the air. All the high-level officials of the thunder-shocking realm in Emperor Dong's palace had taken action at the same time. The pseudo-domain mixed with countless forces and sword intent was like a bomb. Several thunder-shocking realm experts pushed the pseudo-domain at the same time, and the pseudo-domain drove the trembling transport plane. It was like two dark clouds that suddenly arrived. The light in the desert suddenly dimmed. The huge body of the transport plane blocked the sunlight. Countless soldiers of the Yellow Sand Corps raised their heads. The space above their sight was distorted, but the huge body of the transport plane was extremely clear, getting closer and closer. There was still artillery fire in the Yellow Sand Corps. Everything happened so fast that no one had time to make any changes. What changed was the pseudo-domain. The distorted pseudo-domain was completely shattered under the artillery fire, and the transport plane loaded with a lot of ammunition was exposed to the artillery fire. Falling, trembling, deforming. No! Sand Tiger's hoarse, desperate roar suddenly rang out. Explosion! In the quiet desert, there was the first loud noise since the start of the blockade operation. It was earth-shattering. The shockwave produced by the explosion brought up a large amount of yellow sand, which blended with the intense flames. Billowing black smoke rose up crazily, covering everything. The wreckage of the transport planes kept on exploding, and raging flames surged. Flesh, and blood spewed out amidst the raging flames. There were no agonizing cries or wails amidst the loud explosions. The intense explosions occupied everything, and the base that the Yellow Sand Army had yet to finish building in time instantly turned into a true Azura hell. Blood, death, wild sand, fire and black smoke. Under the sunlight, Emperor Dong's palace, which had cut off their retreat at the first time, directly turned everything into an irreversible situation. The Nightmare Troop gathered quickly. At this point, no one had any more hesitation. They didn't even have any regrets. Because everything was meaningless. The yellow sand of the desert was like an army of mountains and seas. Rush over. They could only rush over. The fire was still burning. The sound of explosion had gradually disappeared. The base of the Yellow Sand Corps had almost become a ruin. A large number of mutilated corpses were exposed to the sunlight. Many surviving soldiers climbed up in a daze, completely forgetting what they should do. In the huge explosion, they were lucky not to die. At this moment, they couldn't hear any sound from the outside world. Messy, broken, and battered. Lin Yuxian squinted at this scene, and his eyes were calm without any emotion. The Nightmare Legion had completely assembled behind him. Neat, austere, resolute. His gaze went past the yellow sand army in front of him and looked at the next line of defense. The fifth line of defense was the only special force in the Beijiang military region. Code name Wasteland. The corner of Lin Youxian's mouth moved. Before he could speak, a roar suddenly sounded. In the shining thunder, Sand Tiger, the commander of the Yellow Sand Corps with a ferocious and resentful face, almost rushed over desperately and tried his best to punch Lin Youxian. Lin Youxian raised his hand casually and grabbed Sand Tiger's fist. Under the tremendous force, his body did not move at all. Crack. Lin Youxian's arm shook slightly. In the clear cracking sound, Sand Tiger's entire arm was completely shattered. Sand Tiger let out a muffled groan and clenched his teeth. Under the intense pain, his face became even more twisted. You started this war. He stared at Lin Youxian, and his complicated tone seemed to contain countless negative emotions. You opened fire first. Lin Youxian's voice was soft and flat. If you hadn't come, all this would not have happened at all. Sand Tiger roared like a madman. He was a thunder-shocking realm expert, but he just barely entered the thunder-shocking realm. At the first moment of the explosion, he had no time to retreat. The only choice was to try to protect more people around him. The huge impact made him seriously injured. He could not bear to look at the tragedy in the base. The explosion lasted only for a moment, but thousands of people died in the explosion. There were countless seriously injured people. Although there were many survivors, they did not have to count on any combat capability. The cruel means of Emperor Dong's palace directly dispelled all their courage to resist. From now on, this army almost existed in name only. The plane landed, the explosion, and the base became ruins. The whole process did not take more than 2 minutes. And the war had officially begun. Sand Tiger trembled all over, not knowing whether it was because of pain or despair. If there were no blockade actions, we would not have come here at all. Lin Youxian seemed to lose all interest all of a sudden. He shook his head and said calmly, "It's meaningless to say this. You should know that who is right and who is wrong can't be distinguished by arguing. I will go there today. Your army is just the beginning. Today, many people will die, many people. Maybe I will die on the way. In that case, I will be a sinner, a traitor in your words. Emperor Dong's palace will be responsible for all the responsibilities and consequences today. But I will rush over. When I rush to the desert prison, Chen Fengqing will be responsible for all the responsibilities and consequences." He lowered his head, looked into Sand Tiger's eyes and said calmly, "You are indeed innocent, but at least there is no winner or loser. You can't blame me." Sand Tiger's face was pale, and he was silent for a long time. "Can you understand?" Lin Youxian asked. Sand Tiger slowly raised his head and stared into Lin Youxian's eyes. "You won't succeed, and you can't succeed. But you won't see me fail." Lin Youxian gently flicked his fingers. A sword energy flew out of his fingertips and pierced Sand Tiger's forehead in an instant. Countless soldiers of the Yellow Sand Corps saw this scene. Their willpower completely collapsed. No one knew who first shouted that the division commander was dead. The surviving soldiers fell into complete chaos and began to flee in different directions. Lin Youxian watched this scene quietly and did not chase them. What he had done was enough. It was quiet behind him. The overall aura of the Nightmare Corps became calmer. Lin Youxian turned around, looked at the corps of less than 2,000 people behind him, and asked again, "Can you understand?" No one spoke, but everyone's eyes were more determined. "I can make it simpler." Lin Youxian smiled. His smile was indescribably cruel in the yellow sand and ruins. "If we survive today's battle, we will be the heroes of Jianghu State. If we die here, we will be the sinners of Jianghu State. You can't choose to quit, but you can choose the results you create. Do you understand?" After a short silence, a deafening roar broke through the sky. "Understood." Lin Youxian said no more and turned around directly. "Let's go." The Nightmare Corps marched at full speed and rushed through the ruins of the Yellow Sand Corps. Before anyone could react, they rushed directly to the fifth line of defense guarded by the Special Brigade in the wilderness. This day was December 4th of Jianghu State. When the transport plane of Emperor Dong's palace landed, it was 7 o'clock in the morning on December 4th. At 7:02, The sixth line of defense was directly torn apart by the Nightmare Corps. The Nightmare Corps went all out. Less than 2,000 elites charged at full speed. At 8:55, the fifth line of defense was close at hand. The only special brigade in Beijing was ready in the wilderness. 6,000 elites, fully armed. At 9:40, the line of defense formed by the special brigade in the wilderness was completely shattered. Li Beitian killed Kong Xiao, the captain of the special brigade in the wilderness. 4 platoon captains died in battle, and more than half of the middle-level officers were lost. The Yellow Sand Corps did not stop and went all the way forward. It was like a sharp sword. At 11 o'clock, the fourth line of defense was completely torn apart by the sharp sword. Bai Yuming killed Yang Zhan, the commander of the field corps in Beijing. From 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock. In 4 hours, the Nightmare Corps destroyed nearly 40,000 troops. They were invincible. Chapter 861. Ever since the name of the Nightmare Legion was submitted to the military and was approved, the Nightmare Legion had received a lot of attention. At that time, Li Tianlan was still the commander of the Snowdance Corps, leading the most elite corps of Jianghu state to shed blood for Jianghu state in Eastern Europe. The wind and clouds were turbulent, the general trend was changing, and the invincible realm experts kept dying. All the light seemed to gather on Li Tianlan. During that period, Li Tianlan was like the rising sun. No matter how one tried to ignore it, he was there, dazzling and brilliant. In contrast, the establishment of Emperor Dong's palace was extremely low-key. Even so, the establishment of the Nightmare Legion made many people restless. The first written report submitted by the Nightmare Legion to the military had fully explained the uniqueness of the Nightmare Legion. It was a top-notch troop with top-notch average strength, rich experience, proficient in fighting under all kinds of conditions, and competent in any war mission. To be precise, they were the top war weapons of Emperor Dong's palace. No one would doubt that. At that time, Lin Yuxian was not famous. But with Li Tianlan and Wang Xianxia in front of him, no one dared to underestimate Lin Yuxian's strength. On the contrary, because he rarely fought, everyone felt that he was extremely mysterious. Such a mysterious successor of the Lin clan became the commander of the Nightmare Legion. A new army made up of graduates from the 2 academies. From the very beginning, the establishment of the Nightmare Legion had established its position. Regardless of whether it was the choice of the army commander, the main composition of the army, or the average strength, it all proved that this was a top-notch combat force even in the entire world. Initially, the Nightmare Legion had a total of 1,300 people. Their average strength was at the stabilization phase of the ice-freezing realm. 2 years later, the Nightmare Army had expanded to 1,600 people with an average strength of the peak of the ice-condensing realm after continuous optimization and adjustment of its structure. It was estimated that the average strength of the Nightmare Army would reach the fire-flaming realm in 3 years. This is not a solo game. It was the army. Looking at the troops of every country and every superpower in the world, there was only one real organized army whose average strength was at the peak of the ice-condensing realm. Moreover, this unit only existed 5 years ago. The so-called real army referred to the size of the army, the equipment, the supply system, the command lineup, the combat authority, and a series of other conditions, all reaching the standard of a regular army. That was the former Border Imperial Army, the Thunderbolt Battalion. Invincible and invincible. Currently, the Nightmare Legion, which had less than 2,000 people, was still far from the standard of a regular legion. However, in terms of combat power, the same number of people was almost on par with the Thunderbolt Legion. The graduates of the 2 academies all had good credits, and credits often represented a lot of experience during their studies. Therefore, every graduate could be considered a mature soldier. The Nightmare Legion was naturally a mature legion. Their commander might still be very young and not as experienced as Dongqing Wudi, but Lin Yuxian's current strength had surpassed Dongqing Wudi's. In terms of sharpness and actual combat capability, the Nightmare Corps led by Lin Yuxian would only be stronger and more unstoppable than the Thunderbolt Battalion. In the past 2 years, there had been constant frictions in the Southern Heaven region, but there had been almost no major conflicts. No one had expected that the first large-scale battle after the establishment of the Nightmare Legion would take place between the Nightmare Legion and the Northern Borderline Military Region. In 4 hours, Destruction Army had nearly 40,000. The entire Nightmare Legion was like a thunderstorm that swept through the desert in an instant, without any hesitation or pause. Halt, attack, charge, march, attack. The simplest way, the most violent battle. When people reacted, the Nightmare Legion had broken through two lines of defense. The Yellow Sand Corps and the wilderness had been completely torn apart and scattered. Countless people were watching this scene. Countless people called the Hidden Dragon Sea. Li Huaqing's office became extremely busy. The general office of Jianghu State also became extremely busy. The phones of several secretaries who were close to Li Huaqing almost never stopped ringing. Just from the simple ringing of the phone, Li Huaqing had clearly felt the anxiety and even anger behind the phone calls. It can't go on like this. In the huge office, Hua Zhengyang, who had been communicating with Li Huaqing, suddenly stood up. Should we talk to him again? Do you think he has nothing to do now? Li Huaqing shook his head. It's already like this here. It will only be more chaotic on his side. In any case, it's still necessary to try again. Hua Zhengyang refused to give up. No need. Li Huaqing lowered his head and held the teacup. After a long time he said faintly, he won't listen. He has gone crazy. What is this? Our goal was originally the Wang family of Beihai, but now we launched a war against Emperor Dong's palace first. Who does he think he is? Does he really think that Dongqing Wudi has no temper? They blocked the desert prison. I don't agree with them, but I can't disagree. The termination plan has been exposed. This news must be blocked for the desert prison. But it's just a block. What's happening now is a war. A war between Emperor Dong's palace and Jianghu State. Civil war. What does he want to do? Hua Zhengyang's tone was intense. It was as if he was venting his emotions. Li Huaqing didn't speak. He didn't need to answer anything. Because Hua Fengyang also knew. Things had come to this point, and there was no way to stop. Some things were wrong from the beginning. In other words, once it was exposed, it was wrong. They knew everything that happened today, but it was already irreversible. Therefore, Li Huaqing had withdrawn as soon as the termination plan was exposed and handed over the leadership of this matter to Chen Fengqing. It was not that he cherished his reputation. He didn't care what would happen to him after he suppressed the Wang family of Beihai, and he didn't care about some short-term damage to Jianghu State. Because if he could defeat the Wang family of Beihai, it was indeed beneficial to the development of Jianghu State. There were only 4 words to describe his reason for retreating. It was impossible. The blockade of the desert prison would inevitably lead to a war. Before the decisive battle in Beihai, the war with Emperor Dong's palace was also inevitable. Li Huaqing really didn't dare to bet all his bets on Chen Fengqing. Like two completely red-eyed gamblers, they gambled on the outcome of a war with the future of Jianghu State. In that case, no matter what the result was, Jianghu State was bound to lose. They were leaders, not gamblers. When Chen Fengqing turned from a leader to a gambler, Li Huaqing could only force himself to stay awake and think about the next outcome. As for now, all he could do was wait and see. No matter what the outcome of this war was, he couldn't change it. All he could do was to try to control the situation after the war. Even after the final battle, he would try his best to control the situation. Hua Zhengyang glanced at Li Huaqing. After a long silence he said seriously, "We have to do something." "It's difficult." Li Huaqing simply replied and calmly said, "This is no longer a game." From the perspective of a soldier, this was a war. But from the perspective of the overall situation, this was life and death. Things were doomed the moment the termination plan was exposed. It was the life and death of Chen Fengqing, Li Tianlan, and the Wang family of Beihai. The war in the desert would not be the end, but a beginning. 100,000 troops, thunder-shocking realm experts, invincible realm experts, murderous weapons, everything. He didn't need to look to know that countless people would bleed in this war, and even blood would flow like a river. These people couldn't die in vain. Someone had to pay the price for this. A heavy price. The heaviest price was nothing more than death. Chen Fengqing took over the leadership. He, Emperor Dong's palace, and Beihai had long been in a desperate situation. This was indeed no longer a game. Chen Fengqing had even forgotten or deliberately ignored the original goal. Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai were all in his sight. What he wanted to do was to completely destroy Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. If Emperor Dong's palace and Mount Dibing still existed this time, and Li Tianlan and Wang Xianxia didn't die, Chen Fengqing would die. And it would be soon. This was not a problem that could be solved by giving up the position at all. Li Huaqing took a deep breath. Jianghu State had secretly discussed the candidates for the next directors and members of parliament as early as a few years ago. Now, there was basically a conclusion. Li Huaqing confirmed that he would be re-elected next year. He had been the president for 10 years, and he was generally highly regarded in Jianghu State. Even the academics and the Southeast group voted in favor of him. Because Li Huaqing handled things calmly, used gentle means, and rarely used violent means. When he could achieve the desired effect, he would not hurt many people. Li Huaqing's grasp of propriety could be said to be at the peak. In the current chaotic situation, letting Li Huaqing be re-elected was the safest way. But Li Huaqing was not happy at all. Chen Fengqing single-handedly turned the situation into this. In this war, no matter who won or lost, he would face a more complicated situation than now or even before the game after being re-elected. Li Huaqing bowed his head and took a sip of tea, feeling more and more tired. Lin Yuxian can't die, he said softly. Hua Zhengyang was stunned. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Do you think Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai are good?" "No," Li Huaqing said slowly. "No matter who wins or loses, Lin Yuxian can't die. He is the most useful." If Emperor Dong's palace won, he would not hesitate to let Lin Yuxian replace Kunlun City and become the core force to restrain Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai to reach a new balance. If Chen Fengqing won, the power of Chen Fengqing and the prince group would expand to an unimaginable level. Li Huaqing also needed Lin Yuxian to take the position to ensure his right to speak in the future. Hua Zhengyang thought about it. Finally he nodded and said, "I'll do it." The Beijiang military region was the territory of the prince group, so it was difficult for them to intervene. But Gu Qianquan was still there. No matter how much he cooperated with the prince group, he did not dare to openly ignore the order of the president. Li Huaqing drank tea and did not speak. Hua Zhengyang was shocked to find that the core of the current war was still Emperor Dong's palace, the Wang family of Beihai, and Chen Fengqing. But the most important person had become Lin Yuxian. Chapter 862. A badly mutilated figure was hung on the broken cylinder. The sandstorm attacked. The yellow sand covered his figure and covered his flesh. His body looked like an ornament hanging on a flagpole. The torture had just passed. Many reopened wounds had not had time to heal. The sandstorm kept blowing. The blood beads flowed, soaked in the sandstorm, and fell to the ground. Then, they were blocked by the sandstorm in the distance. The pain kept repeating. He lowered his head and closed his eyes. He seemed to be asleep or dead. Hua! The sound of water breaking through the air rang in his ears. The next moment, a large amount of water mixed with a lot of salt was poured directly on him. The salt mixed with the yellow sand seeped into the deep wound. The piercing pain made his body shiver. He gritted his teeth, opened his eyes and did not say a word. In front of him was a gun with a strange shape but boundlessly domineering. It was like the most primitive double-barreled shotgun, but the barrel continued to extend in his sight and eventually became an exaggeratedly large heavy sniper rifle. The sniper rifle lifted his chin at the entrance of the alley. Gu Qianquan stood under the flagpole and patted his face with the barrel. His movements were elegant and unhurried. But when the muzzle fell on his face, his entire face was deformed under the great force, and several teeth were knocked out. "Lieutenant General, do you know why you are still alive?" Gu Qianquan said with a faint smile. The huge heavy sniper rifle in his hand constantly changed color, from golden yellow to light yellow, and then to orange red. Under the sun, it seemed to be the color of the setting sun. What he held in his hand was the murderous weapon setting sun, which had been passed down for hundreds of years in Jianghu State. "Because you dare not kill me." The salt water penetrated into his body along the wound. His body trembled slightly in pain. He could even feel the yellow sand being rushed into the wound by the water and rubbing against his flesh. "I'm Gu Qianquan, the director of Emperor Dong's palace. You'd better know what you're doing. You must pay for what you've done today." His expression became a little ferocious because of the pain, but the contempt and ghastliness in his tone were vividly displayed. Bang! The barrel of setting sun hit Xiao Mahai's head hard. Blood splattered. Gu Qianchuan raised his palm and opened his domain. The air in the domain was compressed rapidly and turned into countless blades. The blades shrouded Xiao Mahai's body like a storm, cutting his flesh. Sunset's huge muzzle continued to fall on Xiao Mahai's body. That's not the answer I want. I don't dare? You're just a little thunder-shocking realm expert. I don't dare to kill you? What did he think he was? Ha! What was this? What was this? What the F***CK? What was this? Tell me, what is it? Blood splashed on Gu Qianchuan. Ouyang Pengfei, the commander of the 43rd Army, who had been following Gu Qianchuan, hurried over and pulled Gu Qianchuan. He whispered, "Your Highness, don't get excited. It's not worth it." Xiao Mahai's head drooped. He had already fallen into a coma. Wake him up. I'll play with him slowly. The chief steward of Emperor Dong's palace? Heh, what a big shot. You scared me to death. Gu Qianchuan sneered. Your Highness. Gu Qianchuan wanted to say something but stopped. What? Gu Qianchuan narrowed his eyes and looked at Ouyang Pengfei. Is it not fun? Bang. The sunset in his hand once again fell on Xiao Mahai's shoulder and directly broke one of his arms. Fun, ha ha ha, it's really fun. Gu Qianchuan laughed somewhat crazily. His eyes were red, looking like a beast with bloodshot eyes. He would never forget the scene when he caught Xiao Mahai. Xiao Mahai, who carefully avoided the light of the explorer, unknowingly walked into his domain. Gu Qianchuan instantly took action and broke the opponent's invisibility. He stepped on the opponent's head like a dead dog. He was as majestic as a god who controlled life and death. The nearby elites of the 43rd Army all rushed over and surrounded Xiao Mahai. Xiao Mahai kept struggling and was finally kicked away by Gu Qianchuan. His body fell in front of the soldiers of the 43rd Army. He was covered in blood and looked like a wild dog. The wild dog struggled to stand up. His face was bleeding, but he still had a kind of calmness that made Gu Qianchuan feel very strange. Surrounded by countless elites of the 43rd Army, the little warden, who was only at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, looked directly at Gu Qianchuan and said something that Gu Qianchuan did not expect. Do you know what you are doing? It was a question. He actually asked if he knew what he was doing. Gu Qianchuan felt it was incredible. At that time, his mind was still balanced and he did not bother to say more to Xiao Mahai. He just said, "Take him down." This order was naturally issued to the 43rd Army. The elites of the 43rd Army just moved. Xiao Mahai had spoken again. His tone was still that damned calm, but with a touch of coldness and ghastly. I am the supervisor of Emperor Dong's palace. I stand here and represent the entire Emperor Dong's palace. Who dares to stop me? Then the scene froze. Yes, it was so incredible that it froze. After countless elites of the 43rd Army looked at each other, no one moved. Until that moment, Gu Qianchuan's heart really sank to the bottom. It was also from that moment that he completely understood the position of Kunlun City in Jianghu State. He was the first elder of the invincible realm of Kunlun City, and the current acting governor of Kunlun City. He had stabilized the invincible realm, held a murderous weapon, and was also the supreme commander of this blockade operation. He had a high position and was powerful. Gu Qianchuan could be sure that when he held a murderous weapon, he was almost the strongest person in Jianghu State today. Now he ordered his subordinates to catch a supervisor of Emperor Dong's palace. No one dared to move. Because he was the supervisor of Emperor Dong's palace. This identity could make them dare to disobey the order of the acting governor of Kunlun City, their commander-in-chief. What did this mean? At that moment, Gu Qianchuan was so angry that he saw stars and trembled. His anger was mixed with fear. It turned out that Kunlun City had fallen to such a dangerous position in the hearts of the soldiers of Jianghu State unconsciously. Why did this happen? To some extent, the attitude shown by the soldiers showed that they could not afford to offend the supervisor of Emperor Dong's palace than the acting governor of Kunlun City. For more than 20 years, Kunlun City had been the special warfare center of Jianghu State, and Gu Xingyun had always been the top 5 experts on the divine list. Kunlun City developed steadily and established a special warfare group, which was absolutely a behemoth in Jianghu State. They could not compare with the Wang family of Beihai, but they could bear it. After all, the foundation and glory of the other party were there. After overthrowing the Li family, They had always felt that they were the second most powerful wealthy family in Jianghu state. But now, there was another stunning young man in the Li family that they had overturned with their own hands. He had only risen for a few years, but he had once again surpassed the status of Kunlun City? Why? Gu Qianquan stood there and could not say anything for a while. In his sight, Xiao Mahai was moving. He carefully wiped the blood on his face, supported his seriously injured body, and strode forward. Gu Qianquan did not retreat. But the entire encirclement was retreating as Xiao Mahai moved forward. It was because of that sentence. I am the supervisor of Emperor Dong's palace. This sentence made him stare at the pressure of tens of thousands of elites of the 43rd Army, and directly walk forward for nearly 2 kilometers, almost out of the edge of the 43rd Army. No one dared to take action. Gu Qianquan could not bear it anymore. He personally took down Xiao Mahai, hung him on the flagpole, and served him with all kinds of torture for a day. Xiao Mahai suffered pain, but his heart was still calm. Gu Qianquan stopped smiling. Looking at Xiao Mahai hanging on the flagpole, he thought, until now, this damn dog of Emperor Dong's palace still thinks I dare not kill him. Gu Qianquan endured and resisted the desire to kill him now. Looking at Xiao Mahai, who was slowly waking up from a coma, he said in a soft voice, Lieutenant General, don't challenge my patience. I don't kill him because he is valuable. Tell me everything you know about him in the desert prison in the past 2 years. The more detailed, the better. Ha! Xiao Mahai took a deep breath weakly and sneered. I'm afraid you haven't woken up yet. Gu Qianquan, if you have the guts, kill me directly. When His Highness comes out, I'll see how to live. Slap! Gu Qianquan slapped Xiao Mahai's face hard and said expressionlessly, Do you really think I dare not kill you? Come and kill me. Xiao Mahai stared into Gu Qianquan's eyes. His eyes were filled with madness and aggression. How you kill me today, His Highness will kill me in the future. Not only that, but the entire Kunlun city will be buried with me. It's worth it. You don't know what's good for you. Gu Qianquan took a step back and said faintly, Undead. A skinny man came out and sneered. He looked at Xiao Mahai as if he were a prey in his hands. Don't let him die so easily. I want to let him taste real pain and despair. Gu Qianquan paused and continued, And what I want? As you wish, Your Highness. The undead grinned in a low voice. He slowly reached out. 2 extremely thin blades fell into his hands. His eyes were smiling so widely that they were almost invisible. All that was left on his face was excitement and ridicule. Come on, Lieutenant General. You are the guest with the highest rank I have ever received. Let's play a fun game, shall we? The blade in his hand stabbed into Xiao Mahai's abdomen. Xiao Mahai's body suddenly stiffened for a moment. The next second, Xiao Mahai, who could hold back even if salt was sprinkled on the wound, suddenly screamed hoarsely. The screams were accompanied by the undead's increasingly excited laughter, which made everyone's scalp numb. Ouying Pengfei looked at this scene, and his eyes were gradually filled with fear. I still don't understand the situation now. Gu Qianquan looked at Xiao Mahai with some disdain. It's Jianghu State, not me, who really wants to move against Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan. Kunlun City is just cooperating with the action. The Prime Minister has taken over all the dominance of this game. Lieutenant General, the wind has changed. Now it's a war, and Jianghu State will not leave any leeway. Even if Li Tianlan is invincible, so what? Even if Li Tianlan is invincible, Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai will not be able to defeat Jianghu State. Or, do you think that the current Emperor Dong's palace can overthrow the Prime Minister and the Prince Group? Go, go, ah, ah! In the screams that seemed to hurt into the bone, Gu Qianquan praised expressionlessly, You are really a loyal dog with hard bones. The supervisor of Emperor Dong's palace? Oh, is that great? He bowed his head and gently stroked the human emperor in his hand. He calmly said, The elites of Emperor Dong's palace have entered the desert and will not die for the time being. I will let you see your so-called highness suffer a crushing defeat, your so-called goddess fall, and your so-called Emperor Dong's palace fall. The blood-curdling screams came to a stop, leaving behind only hoarse and weak breathing. The undead smiled strangely and took out a new set of toys. Gu Qianquan held the sniper rifle and lifted Xiao Mahai's head. Say it or not. Oh. The only reply he got was a sneer. Do you really think I care about this information? A ferocious look flashed in Gu Qianchuan's eyes. There's no chance, Lieutenant General. Just wait to die here with my colleagues whom I haven't met. Wei Kunlun and Situ Tsangyue will not come here, so no matter how bad things are, I will only face Li Tianlan at most. He held the sniper rifle in his hand and said in a calm and gloomy tone, If it's one-on-one, I have the setting sun in my hand. Who in Jianghu State can beat me? Chapter 863. The screams continued to reverberate. Gu Qianchuan stood motionless under the flagpole, watching the undead use different torture instruments in different ways. He enjoyed it very much. The undead played the game tirelessly and enjoyed it even more. The unimaginable pain kept tormenting Xiao Mahai's will. The surrounding soldiers, including Ouyang Pengfei, the commander of the 43rd Army, subconsciously retreated a little. The undead's method of torture had gone beyond the professional scope. He had a deep understanding of the acupuncture points of the human body. When he tortured people, he rarely saw blood, but the pain was enough to exceed the human body's endurance limit. Xiao Mahai fainted again and again and was awakened by the pain. Gu Qianchuan stroked the murderous weapon in his hand and said lightly, If you regret it, you can tell me at any time. As long as you are willing to betray Li Tianlan, Jianghu State can also give you what Li Tianlan can give you. Hee, ha ha. Xiao Mahai sneered. You keep saying that you don't care about His Highness's intelligence, but in fact, don't you want to know more? Gu Qianchuan, have you used all your confidence to brag? Gu Qianchuan's face was cold. Do you think I'm not Li Tianlan's opponent? Don't trick me. What do you think? Xiao Mahai's voice was hoarse. I have a murderous weapon in my hand. No one in Jianghu State can beat me. Lieutenant General, we still have time. You will tell me. He stepped back and glanced at the undead. Entertain him well. Understood. The undead laughed strangely. Report. A loud and clear voice suddenly rang out. Gu Qianchuan looked back. A middle-level officer of the 43rd Army ran to Ouyang Pengfei and said something. Ouyang Pengfei's face changed. He quickly walked to Gu Qianchuan and stopped talking. What's wrong? Gu Qianchuan asked. The news just came that the Iron Armor Army was defeated. Ouyang Pengfei took a deep breath, and his tone was full of unconcealed fear. Gu Qianchuan suddenly turned his head and looked at the rear of the line of defense of the 43rd Army. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the endless yellow sand outside the line of defense. He was silent for a long time. The Iron Armor Field Corps. This was the fourth line of defense in the desert, and it was also the line of defense with the most military strength. The combat strength of the soldiers might not be the strongest, but the equipment of the field army was the most reasonable. The field army of more than 16,000 people was different from Huangsha, who arrived in a hurry. They had sufficient time to mobilize before the battle. If they had weapons and built a defense system and patrol system, it would not be an exaggeration to say that the iron-armored field army was a shield that sealed off the desert. But now, this shield had been pierced through by a sharp sword flying from the south, at a speed that no one had expected. Gu Qianchuan subconsciously looked at his watch. At 1:15 in the afternoon. How long had it been since the defeat of the Wasteland Special Forces? Trash. After a long time, Gu Qianchuan squeezed a sentence from his teeth. Ouyang Pengfei glanced at him and didn't say anything. How did the Nightmare Legion do it? Gu Qianchuan asked. He understood the strength of the Nightmare Legion, and knew that they could tear through the first few lines of defense. However, no matter what, they shouldn't be that fast. Everyone went crazy. Ouyang Pengfei said with a wry smile. The Nightmare Legion gathered all the high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace to form a sharp knife team. Lin Yuxian was the captain. The sharp knife team directly rushed into the center of the base of the Iron Armor Field Corps. The commander and two deputy commanders of the Iron Armor Field Corps were almost killed by a sword. It's impossible to be so fast, Gu Qianchuan said in a low voice. The Iron Armor Field Corps was a very mature field army. Even without the commander and deputy commander, the chief of staff and others could command. It was impossible for more than 1,000 people to defeat a corps of nearly 20,000 people so fast. The Iron Armor Field Corps did fight back, but the main force of the Nightmare Legion attacked the base desperately. They didn't think about defense at all. They just killed all the way to the end. They didn't care about casualties. They couldn't stop them at all. The muscles in the corners of Gu Qianchuan's eyes twitched fiercely. He said gloomily, "What are the casualties now?" "There is no time to count, but the Iron Armor Field Corps has more than half of the casualties, and the Nightmare Legion has lost about 1/3. 1/3. This also meant that more than 500 elites of the Nightmare Legion had been left behind in the desert. Gu Qianchuan's chest moved up and down obviously. He suddenly found that he had no room to retreat. For Chen Fengqing, the exposure of the termination plan was equivalent to a desperate situation. In a desperate situation, he could only make a last-ditch effort. Either he destroyed Emperor Dong's palace and Mount Dibing, or he would die without a burial place. So he would go all out. What about himself? Gu Qianchuan thought silently. For him, from the moment he appeared here, he also had to face a desperate situation. He still underestimated the reaction speed of Emperor Dong's palace. He also underestimated the determination of Emperor Dong's palace. The loss of 1/3 of the strength of the Nightmare Legion had made him a mortal enemy of Emperor Dong's palace. He had thought about whether to sacrifice himself to completely destroy Emperor Dong's palace to exchange for a bright future for Kunlun City. Now it seemed that he had no other choice. Even if everything ended here, it seemed that Li Tianlan would not let him go. Gu Qianchuan held the murderous weapon setting sun tightly in his hand. This was his greatest confidence to stand there. "How is the Nightmare Legion now?" he asked suddenly. "Still marching full speed." Ouyang Pengfei's face was a little pale. Gu Qianchuan nodded and sneered ferociously. "In that case I will go there in person." His cell phone suddenly rang. Gu Qianchuan froze for a moment. He took out the phone and looked at the number. His face changed and he subconsciously answered the phone. "Hello. Deputy Prime Minister Hua." Ouyang Pengfei subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Hua Zhangyang, the Deputy Prime Minister of Jianghu State, called Gu Qianchuan at this time. Did the attitude of the academics change? He carefully observed Gu Qianchuan's expression. Gu Qianchuan's expression changed little by little, and then it changed faster and faster. Anger, astonishment, unwillingness, self-mockery, and helplessness. All kinds of emotions flashed on his face. The phone call lasted for nearly 10 minutes. He took a deep breath and put down the phone expressionlessly. "Your Highness?" Ouyang Pengfei tentatively called. Gu Qianchuan did not respond to him for a long time. After Ouyang Pengfei called several times, he groaned and turned to leave. "Where are you going, Your Highness?" Ouyang Pengfei asked subconsciously. Gu Qianchuan paused and said coldly, "Back to the lounge." Ouyang Pengfei looked at his back, his eyes deep. He did not know what Deputy Prime Minister Hua said on the phone just now, but he did not forget that before the phone rang, Gu Qianchuan was going to deal with the Nightmare Legion in person. He did not want to wait for the Nightmare Legion to come. He wanted to go back and block the main combat force of Emperor Dong's palace. But now, he hesitated and wanted to report it to Huang Tong. Finally he gave up. Gu Qianchuan sat quietly in the lounge alone. His eyes wandered. No one knew what he was thinking. Hua Zhengyang's phone call was very clear, straightforward, and almost in order. He clearly told Gu Qianchuan that Lin Yuxian could not die. He could be seriously injured or fail, but Jianghu State must give the Lin clan an explanation. Hua Zhengyang's words were very thorough. He clearly told Gu Qianchuan that Lin Yuxian was not alone in this matter. He flew from Tiannan to Beijiang. The headquarters of the Lin clan strictly followed the rules of the clan from beginning to end. Without receiving Lin Yuxian's request for help, they did not say a word about all his actions, nor did they send help, nor did they put pressure on anyone. They still maintained a posture of being aloof from the world. However, the headquarters of the Lin clan did not move, but it did not mean that others did not. Lin Yuxian flew from Tiannan to Beijiang. From the beginning of the war to the present, Jianghu State had received calls from several extremely powerful branch patriarchs of the Lin clan. They did not hide their overbearing and almost domineering attitude. They directly told Jianghu State that if Jianghu State could not give the Lin clan an explanation about Lin Yuxian, then the branches of the Lin clan all over the world would teach Jianghu State a lesson. "If you did not give me an explanation, I would teach you a lesson." This was a very reasonable approach. and the Lin clan was fully capable of doing this. Jianghu state would not be frightened, but the existence of Lin Yuxian was indeed in line with the current needs of the academics. Therefore, when Hua Zhengyang made this call, his wording was extremely tough. Gu Qianquan's expression was a little strange. Now he was in the game and could not see the current situation clearly. However, Hua Zhengyang's call seemed to indicate that the academics and the prince group had officially parted ways. Next, the academics did not need to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace. He just needed to watch. Could the prince group and Chen Fengqing really withstand the pressure of the giant group and the southeast group? If Chen Fengqing could not withstand it, then Kunlun City must consider for itself. The same was true of Gu Qianquan. As Hua Zhengyang said, so far, because he was not directly involved in all the losses of Emperor Dong's palace, he did not have a great relationship with them. The academics could guarantee that Li Tianlan's hatred would not be transferred to him. In other words, with this promise, Gu Qianquan was temporarily safe. The academics had planned to withdraw. Why should he follow Chen Fengqing to the end? Gu Qianquan thought about this question for a long time. Because of hatred? Because of jealousy? Because of fear? In the face of the rise of Emperor Dong's palace, what should Kunlun City do? Time passed little by little. Until the hurried feet. The footsteps sounded again. Ouyang Pengfei rushed into the lounge with a pale face. Gu Qianquan glanced at him silently. Your Highness, the Nightmare Troop has officially fought with the Volcano Troop. Ouyang Pengfei said in a hurry. The Volcano Troop was also a field troop of Beijiang. Its number was less than the Iron Armor Troop, but it was one of the real main troops of Beijiang and the third line of defense of this action. Behind the Volcano Troop was the most powerful armed force of the Beijiang military region in the state of war, the Tiger Armor Troop. That was the second line of defense, but the firepower of the Tiger Armor Troop was enough to completely cover everything in the third line of defense. Although the two troops were two lines of defense, they were almost two forces in one. In their plan, when the physical strength of the Nightmare Troop declined, facing the experienced Volcano Troop and the super firepower of the Tiger Armor Troop, even if they could not completely defeat the Nightmare Troop, it was enough to cause at least 70% casualties to the Nightmare Troop. The rest would be dealt with by the trump card of the 43rd Army and Gu Qianquan in the northwest of Jianghu State. However, the Nightmare Troop moved too fast. They directly rushed to the front of the Volcano Troop in a thunderous manner. Ouyang Pengfei became more and more uneasy. He looked at Gu Qianquan and said in a hoarse voice, Your Highness, I think we should send some people to support the Volcano Troop. If Your Highness and the elites of Kunlun City can take action, it will be the best. A long night is fraught with trouble. It's better to completely extinguish the Nightmare Troop, and we... Why are you panicking? Gu Qianquan asked faintly. Ouyang Pengfei was stunned and looked at Gu Qianquan with a confused face. King just wanted to take action. What happened? Gu Qianquan waved his hand and said, You go to arrange the defense line first. I'll think about it. Ouyang Pengfei thought, What can you think about? But he did not dare to ask more. He hesitated and stepped out step by step. Gu Qianquan sighed softly. It was not until this moment that he completely suppressed his inner killing intent. The future of Emperor Dong's palace was hard to imagine. Lin Yuxian's future would also be incomparably brilliant. Li Tianlan and Lin Yuxian. Not to mention the Wang family of Beihai. These two people were destined to be the enemies of Kunlun City in the future. It could even be said that they were mountains that Kunlun City could not surpass. Today was the best opportunity to destroy them. But with the change of the attitude of the academics, everything had become impossible. Gu Qianquan's thoughts gradually became clear. If he disobeyed the intention of the academics and destroyed Emperor Dong's palace today, the power of Chen Fengqing and the prince group would expand infinitely. But after all, it was impossible for them to dominate. What he would face next was the crazy revenge of the giant group and the southeast group, as well as the overt and covert suppression of some international forces. Under great pressure, Chen Fengqing's most likely choice was to sacrifice the rook to save the king. Who was the rook? Gu Qianquan thought silently. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he was the rook that would be abandoned. So was Kunlun City. He did not dare to follow Chen Fengqing to the end, so he could only learn from the academics and withdraw. So now this opportunity seemed good, but with the withdrawal of the academics, it was not realistic to destroy Emperor Dong's palace. This was definitely a hidden danger to the future of Kunlun City that could not be ignored. But it was much better than Kunlun City being completely abandoned immediately. If it stayed dormant, at least there was a chance. Gu Qianquan shook his head and gradually calmed down. He took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. Your Highness. In the screams, the twisted and strange voice of the undead sounded on the phone. Let's stop for a while. Gu Qianquan gritted his teeth and said slowly, bring Xiao Mahai here. In addition, prepare some medicine. Deal with him first. The undead was silent and said with some doubts, Your Highness? Do it. Gu Qianquan growled. The undead's palm shook. He answered and directly hung up the phone. As soon as the phone was hung up, the bell rang again. Gu Qianquan looked at the number and frowned. It was a completely strange number. He shook his head, too lazy to pay attention to it, and hung up. Then his mobile phone began to vibrate. It was a video communication request. There was only one word. Water. Thinking of the strange phone call just now, Gu Qianquan's heart suddenly sank. He took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. The video on the mobile phone screen shook slightly for a moment. A man who seemed to be shrouded in starlight clouds sat there, holding a baby in his arms. It was a very strange feeling. Gu Qianquan could not see the man's appearance, but he could clearly see the sleeping baby and even feel the man's bright smile. Your Highness Gu Qianquan, the child is very cute. In the video, the man holding the child said with a smile, What's his name? Chapter 864. Gu Qianquan quietly looked at the baby on the screen and was silent for a long time. At this moment, his hands and feet were really cold, and his heart sank to the bottom. He did not know how the other party found the child, but it did not matter. What mattered was the child's significance to him and even to Kunlun City. Gu Qianquan knew that there was something wrong with his body. When he was young, he was too indulgent and did not leave any children. The older he was, the lower the probability of childbirth. He could still leave descendants, but it was close to the theoretical possibility. This child was a great surprise for him, as well as for some people in Kunlun City. Gu Qianquan, Gu Xingyun. Today, the Gu family did not have so many branches. Gu Qianquan represented the lineal descendants of the Gu family. Before the rise of Kunlun City, Gu Qianquan's branch had the right to speak, while Gu Xingyun's branch was the latecomer. These two forces were restrained in Kunlun City, but it did not mean that the two sides were really close. Gu Qianquan's child was undoubtedly the future hope of their lineal descendants. Gu Qianquan had even recently considered taking Ning Yunshui and her son back to Kunlun City. But now, the child was in the hands of a mysterious man. The lifeline of everyone in Gu Qianquan's branch was held in his arms. How was the child exposed? What exactly went wrong? Gu Qianquan was calm on the surface, but his heart was already in a mess. There were even some beads of sweat on his forehead. He stared at the screen, looking at the vague cloud and starlight on the screen. It was a seemingly subtle but almost all-encompassing domain, which was also a power that Gu Qianquan was extremely afraid of. He did not know when such an expert appeared in the dark world. Just by looking at the opponent's domain, he knew that the opponent's realm was higher than his. His potential was exhausted, but he still had eyesight. The opponent's domain was extremely close to perfection. Not to mention him, even Gu Xingyun in his heyday might not be the opponent's opponent. At least Gu Xingyun's domain was not as good as the opponent's. The two of them looked at each other. In the video, the man shrouded in the domain still smiled and gently touched the face of the baby in his arms. What do you want? Gu Qianquan finally spoke. He did not ask who the other party was, nor did he ask how the other party found the child. Instead, he went straight to the point and asked about the other party's purpose. I naturally have something to ask of your highness, but I don't have any connections, so I could only come here. I hope your highness doesn't mind. The man chuckled and his voice was gentle. Speak. Gu Qianquan gritted his teeth. Her highness should still be in the northern desert. I wonder how the war in the desert is going. The man's palm gently stroked the child's face, his fingers inadvertently brushing across the space between his eyebrows. Gu Qianquan's body suddenly tightened. He stared at the screen, his eyes sharp and angry. Her highness raised her eyelids and glanced at him. Gu Qianquan gasped a few times and sat back in his seat. He said with difficulty, "The nightmare troop has penetrated deep into the blockade line and is now breaking through the blockade of the volcano troop." Volcano troop? The hand that was caressing the child's face paused. He raised his head and seemed a little surprised. How could it be so fast? The volcano troop should be your third or second line of defense. The ferocious Tiger Armored Corps has strong firepower, but it needs cooperation. They should not be far from the volcano troop. Are they coordinating the battle? TSK, that is to say, as long as the nightmare troop breaks through the defense line of the volcano troop, they will face you in the 43rd Army next? Gu Qianquan was shocked. At the beginning of the operation, the Beijiang military region had entered a state of strict information blockade. Except for a few giants in Jianghu state, few people could understand their specific arrangement in the desert. The other party explained everything on the defense line in one sentence. Where did he get the news? Was he familiar with Kunlun City or Beijiang? Or was he familiar with Jianghu state? What's your name? Gu Qianquan forced himself to calm down and looked at the other party with a dignified face. The man sat there with the child in his arms and thought for a long time. He casually glanced at Gu Qianquan and said casually, "What did you say?" "I asked you what's your name." Gu Qianquan gritted his teeth. The other party's unconscious carelessness fully explained a problem. He did not take him seriously at all. The rising Emperor Dong's palace, the turbulent Mount Dibing, and the silent Lin clan made the general trend chaotic. Kunlun City could not find its position in the general trend. The acting governor of Kunlun City and the first elder, who were extremely noble a few years ago, were now being ignored by more and more people. What made Gu Qianquan most sad was that it was not because he and Kunlun City had done anything wrong that caused such a situation. It was just because the short era that belonged to them was changing and was about to become the past. Gu Qianquan gritted his teeth, full of unwillingness. The man nodded and said casually, "You can call me His Majesty." "You have a big tone." Gu Qianquan's body shook and he sneered. In the dark world, His Majesty had always been a specific title. It specifically referred to the invincible realm. For example, Wang Tianzong. Maybe there was a pope. But strictly speaking, the Vatican could not be regarded as a force in the dark world. The Knights Templars under the Vatican were. In the entire dark world, there was only one majesty who could be recognized by people, and that was the Sword Emperor. With the corresponding strength, I naturally have the corresponding pursuit. I am not arrogant. On the contrary, I can guarantee that no one in the entire dark world will be more cautious than me. He raised his palm. The baby in his arms floated up and slowly fell on the crib behind him. The starlight clouds on the screen slowly fluctuated. The muffled voice rang out faintly. The voice was extremely charming, soft, and urgent, which made people's imagination run wild. "Sorry, although it's a little immoral, from now on, your woman belongs to me. As for the child, do you want it?" Gu Qianquan's face turned red. Every time the voice in the video that had made him crazy, intoxicated, and obsessed sounded, it brought him unimaginable humiliation. From that voice, he heard joy, indulgence, and desire. This bitch. Gu Qianquan shivered all over. He never thought that one day his woman would make him a cuckold, and the distance was just across the screen. "Answer my question, child. Do you want it?" His Majesty looked at him quietly. He could feel Gu Qianquan's embarrassment and anger, but he still spoke loudly. "You will pay the price." Gu Qianquan stared at him. "Your men and that bitch will pay the price. I'm afraid it's difficult." His Majesty smiled. "I don't want to talk big, but at present, Kunlun City is really nothing in my eyes. Not to mention you, even if Gu Xingyun's strength recovers to the peak, he may not be a match for my subordinate." His calm voice was so true that people could not help but believe it. Gu Qianquan was shocked and speechless. At his peak, Gu Xingyun was an expert who was infinitely close to the half-step invincible realm. If he was not a match for one of His Majesty's subordinates, what realm was his subordinate in? Even if he was not a match for one of His Majesty's subordinates, at least he was infinitely close to the peak invincible realm. Even in the whole dark world, such a person was a real giant, but he became His Majesty's subordinate. His Majesty. Gu Qianquan was thinking about this title and became more and more frightened. He was silent for a long time. The charming voice was still ringing in his ears, becoming more and more urgent. It seemed to be about to reach the peak. In his ears, the voice was like a farewell and a mockery. So, Gu Qianchuan asked, "Are you humiliating me?" "I'm just telling you a fact to facilitate our next conversation." His Majesty said blandly, "Well, Your Highness, I can confirm that this is your son, but your woman is unlikely to belong to you in a short time. I can return the child to you, as long as you promise me a request." He paused and laughed. "As I said, I have something to ask." "Say it." Gu Qianchuan's heart was in a mess. He glanced at His Majesty and said in a cold tone, "I hope Your Highness can lead the army to destroy Emperor Dong's palace." His Majesty narrowed his eyes and said softly, "Li Tianlan, Lin Yuxian, Li Beitian, Bai Yuming. Everyone in Emperor Dong's palace must die. Your Highness, you have tens of thousands of troops and murderous weapons. I believe you can do this. Kill all the important figures in Emperor Dong's palace. I will return the child to you." Gu Qianchuan's palm, which was about to drink tea, suddenly shook, and the tea splashed out. He raised his head in astonishment. "Are you King crazy? That's what I want." His Majesty's tone was calm and almost indifferent. "Don't you think it's a pity not to take advantage of such a good opportunity? You have the setting sun in your hand. Even Li Tianlan is not your opponent. After killing Li Tianlan, your strength is enough to kill Lin Yuxian. Tens of thousands of troops are enough to destroy the Nightmare Corps. This is my requirement. Now the elites of Emperor Dong's palace who enter the desert, no matter who they are, must die. If you can't do it, I will kill your son and let you have no descendants. You are the Prime Minister's man." Gu Qianchuan seemed to be too shocked, and his tone became a little numb. "There is indeed cooperation, but it is my own interest to destroy Emperor Dong's palace." His Majesty said lightly. Gu Qianchuan nodded and suddenly said, "What do you think I should choose?" His Majesty frowned. "I can indeed kill Li Tianlan and destroy Emperor Dong's palace. But then, just before you, I received the order from the academics. If I take action now, I will be openly disobeying the order. What will happen to Kunlun City? What will happen to me?" Gu Qianchuan asked. "Kunlun City will be fine. After all, you are not the city governor of Kunlun City. Although Gu Xingyun is seriously injured, his accumulation over the years is enough for him to deal with all this. As for you..." His Majesty was silent. "So, you want me to commit treason?" Gu Qianchuan looked at His Majesty with a complicated tone. More than 20 years ago, the Li family fell to the bottom because of Li Guangtu's treason. More than 20 years later, would Kunlun City also fall apart because of Gu Qianchuan's treason? Everything was like a reincarnation. Don't think too much. Now, whether it is the academics, Chen Fengqing, or the Wang family of Beihai, they can't care about Kunlun City. You may not die if you commit treason. I can give you a choice." His Majesty said quietly. "Choice?" Gu Qianchuan sneered. "For example?" "For example, be my fifth follower. I can save your life and try my best to improve your martial arts realm. I can also cooperate with Kunlun City to re-stabilize its position. Believe me, I can do this." Gu Qianchuan looked hesitant. Because everything His Majesty said was so good that it was somewhat unrealistic. He originally wanted to kill Li Tianlan, but he did not want to die, so he had been struggling. After receiving the order from the academics, he suppressed his unwillingness. What about now? If His Majesty's guarantee was effective, he would kill Li Tianlan and Lin Yuxian and get rid of the future threat to Kunlun City. At this time, no one had time to care about Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun could relatively calmly resist the storm after his treason. He would not die. After becoming His Majesty's follower, he would improve his martial arts realm. With His Majesty's strong support, Kunlun City's status in the Dark World would rise and eventually become the real national defense force of Jianghu State. And all of this only required him to disobey orders once. Or, it was a reputation for treason. As long as he dared to disobey the order of the academics and destroy Emperor Dong's palace with a reputation of treason, all this could really be achieved. In this matter, Chen Fengqing would certainly support him. In the future, when Li Huaqing and Hua Zhengyang retired, It was not impossible for him to take off the hat of treason and return to Jianghu state. To be honest, if killing Lin Yuxian and Li Tianlan was only the price, Gu Qianchuan could accept it without hesitation. But he always felt that there was a trap. "Why should I believe you?" he asked suddenly. "This is cooperation, Your Highness. You are now a key figure who can change the future situation. If you make a decision, I can guarantee that the whole dark world will be different in the future. It will be our world. I need you to change the situation. I need a follower who is strong enough and an ally who is strong enough." A short and seductive scream came from the screen. The storm officially stopped. Gu Qianchuan's mouth twitched fiercely and he did not speak. The sound of footsteps rang out from the screen. A steady voice chuckled and said, "Your Majesty." His Majesty nodded and looked at Gu Qianchuan. "As a sincerity of cooperation, I can show you part of my strength." The phone screen turned, and Moraid's face appeared on the screen. He was naked, with sweat beads and a small ambiguous red mark on his chest. "This is my first follower. You should know him." Because of the shock, Gu Qianchuan's body became a little stiff. Of course, he knew Moraid. The former deputy commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps had exposed his strength that was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm in the chaos of Eastern Europe. Now he had left the Holy Disarmament Corps and was in charge of the Knights Templar of the Vatican. He was almost the top expert in Europe. How could he be His Majesty's follower? Gu Qianchuan suddenly thought of himself. If he also agreed to His Majesty's request, he would be the fifth follower. Moraid was the first and he was the fifth. Who were the other three? "One of my followers has died. In addition to Moraid, there are two other followers, both of whom are in the invincible realm and have their own strength. I need to expand my influence. You and Kunlun City are absolutely heavyweight targets for me. Do you know what this means?" Gu Qianchuan was silent for a long time. At this moment, no one knew what he was thinking. His eyes gradually turned blood red, and he became incomparably crazy. "I see," he said. "Protect my son." He hesitated, finally lowered his head and whispered, "Your Majesty." His Majesty laughed. There seemed to be a demon bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws in the starlight cloud. He laughed and nodded. Happy cooperation. The video was hung up. In the sound of footsteps, the undead dragged Xiao Mahai, who was somewhat out of shape, in. "Your Highness, do you want to treat him right away?" the undead asked softly. Gu Qianchuan glanced at him and said faintly, "Drag him out, hang him up and play with him slowly." The undead. Xiao Mahai. Both of them cursed in their hearts at the same time. In the sound of hurried footsteps, Ouyang Pengfei rushed in again. "Your Highness." Gu Qianchuan slowly got up and said in a calm voice, "Needless to say, the 43rd Army, listen up." "Yes." Ouyang Pengfei subconsciously straightened up. "Immediately transfer some elites to the volcano force with me. I'll do it myself. This farce should end," Gu Qianchuan said slowly. At this moment, he finally made a decision. An extremely crazy decision. Chapter 865. The invincible edge of the Nightmare Army finally stagnated a little when it encountered the Volcano Field Army. Major General Yang Xiaoxiong, the commander of the Volcano Army, was not a famous general of Jianghu State, but he was the most standard soldier of Jianghu State. 43 years old this year, he was one of the key generals trained by the Prince Group. But strictly speaking, his character was far purer than his standpoint. He was iron-blooded, tough, resolute, silent, and calm. He had everything a soldier should have, but he didn't have anything a soldier shouldn't have. Because of this, although he was born in the Prince Group, he received countless praises in the military. Everyone, including Dongqing Wudi, had a very positive impression of him. Yang Xiaoxiong was one of the few non-members of the giant group who had entered the Border Control Corps and was eventually recommended by Dongqing Wudi to the army headquarters. Yes, Yang Xiaoxiong was a key general of the Prince Group, but it was the giant group that helped him cross the threshold from a colonel to a general. Therefore, Yang Xiaoxiong had always respected Dongqing Wudi, but that was all. Just like how he also respected the leaders of the Prince Group. From a grassroots officer to a major general of Jianghu State, his purity hadn't changed at all. He didn't get married, and he had no children. The volcano field army was everything to him. He wouldn't welcome them, flatter them, or express any opinions that had nothing to do with the volcano army. Even inside the prince group, he didn't have much sense of existence, but his existence was really reassuring. It seemed that he had never cared about the existence of groups or factions. As a soldier, the word "obey orders" ran through his entire military life. At the most critical moment, people like Xianxia were undoubtedly the most reliable and trustworthy people. Therefore, the entire Beijiang military region had high hopes for Xianxia and the volcano army. And the volcano army didn't let the Beijiang military region down. This field army, which was more disciplined than anything else, directly charged at the Nightmare Army in an unimaginably decisive manner, knowing that it was unlikely to stop the Nightmare Army. The whole army charged. Take the initiative to attack. When the first Volcano Legion scout died in the hands of the Nightmare Legion, the entire Volcano Legion was like a raging tide that swept over in an instant. Artillery fire poured down from the ferocious tiger-armored legion behind the Volcano Legion, burning the sky and shaking the desert. Amidst the earth-shattering roars, countless troops rushed over and dispersed the Nightmare Legion, which was only left with a little more than 1,000 people. Cannon fire, frost, lightning, raging fire. Blood and corpses splattered in every corner of the desert like an explosion. Lin Yuxian was covered in blood from head to toe, and the blood splashed into his eyes. His pupils were already blood red, and there were enemies everywhere in his sight. The dagger team formed by them was the strongest point of the entire Nightmare Legion, and the Volcano Legion also focused on attacking this point. The other party's unyielding choice completely represented his determination to do whatever it took. All the soldiers close to Lin Yuxian were smashed by the sword energy. But before the broken bodies fell, more people had rushed up with their own bodies, layer by layer. A large number of soldiers madly attacked the pseudo-domain formed by the dagger team of the Nightmare Legion. Artillery fire roared in the rear, and Lin Yuxian was unable to move for a while. He was still killing. But thousands of people pushed over together in front of him. Every step he took, he had to step on a lot of blood and corpses. The Nightmare Legion began to suffer continuous casualties under the almost crazy attack. Lin Fengting and others were daggers. When this dagger was surrounded, the forces at the back would definitely hesitate, and casualties would be unavoidable. The formation is in chaos. The existence of the pseudo-domain isolated most of the sound, but a small amount of sound that penetrated in was still deafening. Li Beijian looked back in the sky full of blood. The Nightmare Legion, which did not have many people, was still falling down quickly. One of the elites of the Legion was directly pulled out by the soldiers of the Volcano Legion. The soldiers almost all over the mountain rushed over like ants. Shrill screams accompanied by blood rang out. The swarming ants quickly decreased, and the elites of the Legion never stood up again. This won't work. The other brothers are surrounded. If we can't rush over, we will all be annihilated in the end. Let's support first. Let's gather people and push over together. Fairy Tail's voice was a little sharp. He was a newly promoted high-level official in Emperor Dong's palace, and his strength was relatively weak. At this time, he was already injured. You and Xiaoyu are in charge of support. Gather people and be careful. The sword light kept moving. Lin Fengting, who frowned, directly gave the order. Fairy Tail and Yi Huayu nodded at the same time. I'll go find the nearby commander and kill him first. Li Beijian's voice was a little cold. It's useless. Bai Yoming's voice sounded. The Volcano Legion is the trump card field legion of the Beijiang military region. In this legion, discipline is more important than anything else, especially on the battlefield. Such a legion is the most thorough in carrying out orders. The sword energy in his hand gathered into a shocking sharpness, and finally turned into a beam of light that shot straight ahead. Wherever the beam of light passed, the human wall dozens of meters ahead suddenly broke. Blood and flesh splattered in the air. In the next second, the human wall was blocked by the people of the Volcano Legion, and they continued to rush up. Countless attacks hit the pseudo-domain in front of them crazily. Without the real invincible realm, the domain was not perfect at all. A large number of attacks fell, and the pseudo-domain was turbulent. It seemed that it would be broken in the next second. Bai Yuming carefully looked at the soldiers in front of her. Her somewhat enchanting but endlessly sharp eyes had complicated emotions. In her sight, There were one ferocious and fierce face after another, with undisguised killing intent and fear of death. All of this eventually turned into a ferocity that was almost irrational. They desperately rushed up and fell down. After their corpses were trampled to pieces, more attacks hit the domain again. After the fear exceeded the limit, there was only madness that was close to fanaticism. Bai Yuming narrowed her eyes and whispered, "In their eyes, we are the real enemy. Under such circumstances, the only order they receive is to charge. It makes no sense to kill the commander." "Sister Bai, do you have any suggestions?" Lin Yuxian suddenly asked. "No." Bai Yuming whispered, "The real war is originally a head-on confrontation." "You're right." Lin Yuxian was silent for a while. The real war is originally a head-on confrontation. In this case, an extremely clear sword chime suddenly appeared in the extremely chaotic battlefield. The scarlet sword light rushed into the crowd in an instant with a lot of blood. Flesh and blood flew. Lin Yuxian's firm voice resounded through the desert. "Nightmare Legion, charge!" Charge. This time it was a real charge. He was not thinking about the defense line. He was not thinking about the distance. He was not thinking about the physical strength. He was not thinking about the victory or defeat, life or death. Go all out. Charge. They met on a narrow road. Boom! In the violent roar, the entire Nightmare Legion completely broke out. They did not reserve their physical strength for the final battle. Everyone showed their strongest state. The fire was monstrous. There were flames everywhere on the yellow sand. Huge ice thorns were constantly condensing in the fire. Kill! In the roar that went straight to the sky, the remaining Nightmare Legion seemed to have completely lost their minds. They joined Emperor Dong's palace and joined this battlefield. Now there was no way back. As Lin Yuxian said, if they won, they would be heroes. If they lost, they would be sinners. So, they could only move forward. There was no need to think about the final battle. They had to pass through the Volcano Legion in front of them first. The fire was flying. Everyone in the Nightmare Legion was breaking out. Under the desperate attack of the soldiers, a platoon leader of the Nightmare Army suddenly opened his hands. The extremely hot flames were like two torrents. The high temperature of the desert was originally a hell for experts in the fire-flaming realm. The torrent surged wildly with extremely heavy power, covering a radius of nearly 20 meters in an instant. "Cooperate!" The squadron leader bellowed furiously. There was no need for him to speak at all. The two team members who had gradually separated from him had already taken action at the same time. The flames flowed, and the cold ice wall surrounded them from all directions. The ice wall enclosed all the flames and became thicker and thicker. Under the cruel and decisive cooperation, all the soldiers and officers of the Volcano Legion within a radius of 20 meters were surrounded by the ice wall. A large piece of fire was burning their flesh and burning the ice layer. The ice layer gradually melted and merged with the burnt flesh and blood. The flames turned into liquid, like magma. In the scream, a team member died in the siege of the Volcano Legion. The squadron leader, who had created a pool of magma, suddenly roared and slapped the ice wall in front of him. Boom! The thick ice wall suddenly exploded, and the magma-like flames inside sprayed everywhere. A large number of soldiers fell to the ground, howling in the flames, and were overwhelmed and trampled by the increasingly chaotic crowd. The squadron leader, who had done his best, did not hesitate. A huge flaming broadsword appeared in his hand. The long flaming broadsword danced wildly in the crowd. He rushed straight in one direction, trying to gather with his team members. "Go to hell, all of you go to hell." The roar sounded in every corner of the battlefield. The squadron leader's eyes were red. He waved his broadsword madly and kept moving forward. "You go to hell too." A low sneer suddenly sounded behind him. An expert in the fire-flaming realm of the Volcano Legion in an ordinary soldier's uniform approached the squadron leader and punched him hard in the back. Puff! Blood spurted out of his mouth. His body rose into the air, and the expert of the Volcano Legion followed him like a shadow. He jumped into the air and stepped hard on the squadron leader's head. The squadron leader stared at him with a look of unwillingness. The raging fire was still burning. The sun and the raging fire sprinkled on the broken ice and yellow sand, reflecting some messy light. Space seemed to flicker in front of his eyes. It was like a very faint sword light. Faint, empty, but it seemed to be everywhere. The sword light flashed in front of his eyes quickly. In the eyes of the squadron leader, the fire-flaming realm expert who had jumped into the air and successfully attacked him was cut into 2 pieces silently like tofu in front of the sword light. The sword light passed by in an instant and his body was cut into 2 pieces silently. The surroundings seemed to be quiet for a moment. When the squadron leader's body fell to the ground. On the desert battlefield, there seemed to be an endless amount of sword light suddenly flying up. There was no blood, no wailing. In the seemingly blurry space, there were subtle but extremely fast sword light everywhere. The sword light was so light, but it was extremely fatal. The squadron leader stood where he was, his body trembling, and his face was fanatical. In his eyes, the soldiers of the Volcano Legion, who seemed to be endless, were falling down one by one. Armed to the teeth, and equipped with riot shields, everything turned into a piece of paper in front of the tiny sword light. Penetrated, torn, and crushed. In the silence, only the sword light shone. North, south, east, and west. Fast. It was so fast that no one could react. In everyone's eyes, there seemed to be countless swordsmen flashing in different directions at the same time, unscrupulously harvesting lives. Countless experts of the Volcano Legion wanted to fight back, but they couldn't keep up with the speed of the sword light. Ice-condensing realm experts died with 1 touch, and fire-flaming realm experts died with 1 touch. At this moment, the sword light seemed to be divided into countless parts. It appeared where it should be. The faint but extremely sharp sword light directly interrupted the attacking rhythm of the Volcano Legion. A large number of elites of the Nightmare Legion who were besieged only saw the sword light flash, and the next moment, the enemies who besieged them had become a mass of flesh and blood. This time was too short. Maybe it was 1 second, maybe it was just a few seconds, but the sword light in the twinkling of an eye suppressed the light of the whole battlefield. Boom! Amidst the sudden explosion, countless sword lights suddenly merged into one. Countless thunderbolts instantly expanded and exploded like a bomb. Seeing this scene, the soldiers of the Volcano Legion subconsciously stopped. On the other hand, the Nightmare Legion burst into cheers. Everyone knew what this explosion meant. He was one of the only 2 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in the Volcano Legion. He was the vice commander of the Volcano Legion, codenamed Thunder Snake. His existence brought a lot of trouble to the Nightmare Legion. The shining sword light approached from afar and directly came to Thunder Snake. 1 sword. The peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and 1 touch would kill. The morale of the Nightmare Legion soared. Everyone knew this sword. Even if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they had at least heard of it. In the few years of development of Emperor Dong's palace, this sword could be said to be really famous in Tiannan. This was the last move of the Great Void Sword of Mount Shu. Supreme Great Void. Only when one entered the peak of the thunder-shocking realm could he really control the Great Void Sword. The dazzling sword energy converged in one place layer by layer. The energy of Thunder Snake kept surging under the guidance of the sword. Explosions kept happening around him, and the explosions swallowed all the soldiers of the Volcano Legion around him. The incorporeal sword light stood beside him and gradually became clearer. Li Baitian's figure appeared in front of everyone. The Great Void Sword trembled violently in his hand, and the sound of the sword kept ringing. He raised his long sword, and the almost invisible sword intent kept surging in his hand. He pointed his sword at the Volcano Legion that didn't retreat but became more and more crazy. He said with indifferent eyes, "Kill them, go all out." At this point, there was no need to save any strength. After killing through this line of defense, they would face the 43rd Army and Gu Qianchuan. It was no longer important to save strength. The Nightmare Legion assembled once again. Li Baitian raised the Great Void Sword in his hand. Bang! An extremely dull sound suddenly appeared on the whole battlefield. It was the sound of breaking. The whole space seemed to shake violently. On the front line, without Li Baitian's sword energy, the pseudo-domain jointly built by the high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace was directly broken in the face of the continuous artillery fire. Behind the Volcano Legion, the ferocious Tiger Armored Corps poured the artillery fire directly toward the Nightmare Legion. It was like the end of the world. Chapter 866. The complicated orders were passed down as soon as the domain was broken. The chaotic battle situation remained the same. The soldiers of the Volcano Legion were still rushing forward desperately. Orders were given one after another, from the regiment level to the company level. The soldiers of each class received clear orders. The chaotic battlefield was changing quietly. Emperor Dong's palace began to assemble. And the Volcano Legion also became a whole under the orders one after another. Lin Yuxian was still in the front. Covered in blood, he stood straight, like a divine sword that could tear the sky. A streak of scarlet sword light shone in the surging crowd. The sword light was like water, and the sword energy was like a tide. In everyone's line of sight, a blood-colored arc of light appeared in midair. The arc of light reflected the sunlight and expanded rapidly. Lin Yuxian, whose essence, qi and spirit had reached the peak, held the long sword in his hand. He raised the sword edge and said coldly, "Kill them all." Where the long sword pointed, the weapon pointed. The huge bloody arc of light directly cut into the crowd with unimaginable murderous intent. The world seemed to turn red. The desert became a sea of blood. Lin Yuxian strode forward. Endless sword energy surged around him, gathered like a dragon, and went on a rampage. The space was torn by the sword energy inch by inch. Countless dense sounds burst out at the same time and swept across the battlefield like a dragon's roar. This was the Dragon Fist. Lin Yuxian's own sword energy Dragon Fist. Countless dragon-shaped sword energy surged wildly around him with unparalleled sharpness. Lin Yuxian rushed to the front. Charge, charge, charge. Under the dragon-shaped sword energy, all the obstacles in front of him were broken. Lin Yuxian was bathed in blood and almost became a bloody man. Under his leadership, the entire Nightmare Legion was like a sharp sword again, piercing into the defense of the Volcano Legion without reservation. They moved forward with indomitable will, destroying all obstacles. Is that Lin Yuxian? The tent in the center of the Volcano Legion's base was converted into a temporary command room. Through the screen, the commander of the Volcano Legion quietly watched the extremely tragic battle situation. His expression was as hard as iron. On the other screen, Lin Dong, the commander of the fierce Tiger Armored Corps, who was fighting with the Volcano Legion, frowned and said in a dignified tone. Yang Xiaoxiong did not speak and just stared at the screen. Old Yang, we can't go on like this. The Volcano Legion can't hold on any longer. This person is not much worse than Li Tianlong 3 years ago. Lin Dong said in a low voice. It's still not enough. Yang Xiaoxiong said slowly. He was a rare superior of the half-step invincible realm in the Beijiang military region, so he naturally had better eyesight. But on the current battlefield, that bit of difference is meaningless. Lin Dong looked at Yang Xiaoxiong seriously. Yang Xiaoxiong was silent for a moment before he shook his head. Sighing softly, he said, "The quality of the army still can't keep up. I can maintain their will and fighting spirit, but something like strength is not something that can be obtained just because you want it." "What are you going to do?" Lin Dong asked. "We can only fight." Yang Xiaoxiong raised his eyebrows. He wasn't handsome, but he was extremely tough. "We can only fight to the death." Lin Dong was silent for a long time. After a long time, he softly said, "Is that necessary? We don't have a choice. As soldiers, we should carry out orders. And none of us can say that such orders are wrong. The existence of Beihai does harm the interests of Jianghu state to some extent. Emperor Dong's palace is another Beihai. We really can't let them grow. As for the right or wrong of this war, that's a problem of decision-making. I'm the commander of the Volcano Corps. The only thing I can do is carry out orders." He looked at Lin Dong and smiled, which was rare. "The next step is up to you." "What do you mean?" Lin Dong frowned. "When they rush through the line of defense of the Volcano Corps, the firepower of the Tiger Armored Corps can be maximized. There's no need for any estimation. Just destroy everything directly. Only in this way will today's sacrifice be worth it. An army of tens of thousands of people will get rid of the cancer in the future for Jianghu state. In fact, this is a fair deal." "Do you really have no concerns at all?" Lin Dong looked at him. "You should know Minister Dongqing's opinion on this matter. Don't forget, you are also a soldier of the Border Control Corps." "I am a soldier of Jianghu state," Yang Xiaoxiong said coldly. He narrowed his eyes, and a complicated look flashed across his eyes. He said softly, "It's all over." Lin Dong wanted to say something more, But Yang Xiaoxiong had already turned off the communication. He looked at the screen. On the screen, the dragon-shaped sword energy raged wildly. Blood and corpses piled up crazily all the way. The entire Nightmare Corps was advancing forward at an unimaginable speed. If there were no accidents, the other party would soon be able to push into his command room. The gap in hard strength was indeed not something that could be solved by fighting intent. Moreover, at this point in the battle, no matter how strong the willpower of the Volcano Corps was, the formation was a little scattered. Yang Xiaoxiong's eyes wandered a little and looked at the side of Lin Yuxian. He took a deep breath and suddenly rose into the air. The tent of the headquarters was directly torn apart. The desert wind blew in with yellow sand. It was desolate. Now is not the time to hold back. Lin Yuxian repeated this sentence again. But this time, this sentence was not for the Nightmare Corps. It was for the people around him. What is the meaning of this war? We can't know until the war is over. His tone was very serious and a little confused. Beside him Bai Yuming said, Are you all right? The invisible sword light shuttled wildly in the front line, forming a straight line. The sword light was so fast that it was stained with blood all the way. The whole front line became a red line as the sword light passed. Li Beitian stopped beside Bai Yuming and asked with a slight frown. Everyone could feel that there was something wrong with Bai Yuming. She was the only superior of the half-step invincible realm in the high level of Emperor Dong's palace. But in this war, she did not play the role that a superior of the half-step invincible realm should have. Everyone was saving strength and physical strength at the beginning. But now, it was time to show their trump cards. I'm all right. Bai Yuming shook her head hard. She looked at the battlefield in front of her. Looking at the ferocious and fearful enemies that were charging at him, Lin Fan felt a chill run down his spine. Jianghu State. Enemies. The combination of these two words almost completely subverted Bai Yuming's worldview. She really didn't understand why things became like this, and she didn't want to meet the army in front of her. The Volcano Corps. Who would be responsible for the blood and corpses that flowed on the desert today? The soldiers of the Volcano Legion had gone completely crazy. They formed a human tide, and the human tide pushed everyone forward. Everyone rushed forward like crazy, attacking, and dying. Death became insignificant in the war. It was so insignificant that everyone didn't seem to care. They were not afraid of death. The only purpose of everyone rushing over seemed to be to attack, even if this kind of attack was meaningless. For soldiers, the greatest meaning of war is life and death. Live to win or die to win. Apart from that, there is no other meaning. Now that you're standing on the battlefield, don't think about the meaning behind the war. That's none of your business. Look at the enemies in front of you. They're doing everything they can to take your life. Put away all the weakness in your character. Pick up your sword and kill your way over. There are only two kinds of people who die on the battlefield. Those who die in the hands of the enemies on the battlefield are heroes. Those who die because of weakness are fools. Come on, I'll teach you a move. Watch carefully. This move may not be worse than the kendo of your jade pool. Remember the meaning of your existence. On the battlefield, the only and the whole meaning of your existence is to carry out orders. Kill them with me, for Jianghu State. While he was in a trance, many images flashed in his mind. Bai Yuming looked at the enemy in front of her. She took a deep breath and laughed. An extremely soft long sword appeared in her hand, and the clear blade trembled violently. I'm fine. She looked at Lin Yuxian and then at Li Beitian, and affirmed again. Li Beitian nodded. His figure drifted, and the sword light flashed. Another light that was much brighter than the great void sword suddenly burst out from Bai Yuming. Bai Yuming's body disappeared. The ethereal sword light was still shuttling on the battlefield. The dragon-shaped sword energy tore the world apart. The soft sword straightened in an instant. On the battlefield of blood and bones, an extremely bright sword light ran through the distance of hundreds of meters in an instant. It was swift, bright, and gorgeous. The bright sword light pushed forward crazily, instantly surpassing Lin Yuxian and Li Beitian. Afterimages appeared one after another on the battlefield. The afterimages of people and the afterimages of swords. Countless soldiers of the Volcano Corps evaporated in an instant in the sword light. The super destructive power and the dazzling sword light attracted the attention of most people in an instant. Yang Xiaoxiong, who had risen from the command room, also saw this scene. An incomparably cold, murderous intent flashed across his eyes. Only a few people recognized this sword move. This was the unique skill of Jade Pool. The glimpse of aurora. The sword light and the afterimages of people moved forward in the crowd. In Yang Xiaoxiong's sight, the sword light that was moving forward suddenly rose up. Bai Yoming's figure went into the sky with a white line that tore the desert apart. Heaven-breaking rainbow sword. The falling point of this sword was sinister and vicious. But for Emperor Dong's palace, the falling point of this sword was perfect. If this sword fell on the ground, the sword energy would be so mighty that the volcano core in the entire area would no longer have the ability to fight. High in the sky, the sword energy was like a rainbow, and the woman was like a dragon. At this moment, Bai Yuming had an unparalleled elegance. Yang Xiaoxiong suddenly snorted. When the rainbow-like sword light fell, he was already standing in the center of the sword energy. The sound of metal rubbing rang out in the desert. In the chaotic battlefield, a large amount of yellow sand suddenly flew into the air and built an earth wall. The sword light in the sky became brighter and brighter, smashing the earth wall on the ground all the way down. The earthen walls, which were as thick as a city, lit up with thunder-like blue light. The light shone in the sun with indescribable coldness. Yang Xiaoxiong stood in the center of the light. He held a long saber in his hand. In the hundreds of years of history of the Dark World, the pinnacle of martial arts had always been swordsmanship. The swordsmanship of Beihai. The swordsmanship of the Li family. The swordsmanship of the Lin clan. In the entire Zhongzhou state, only one martial arts force was used to using sabers. A force that had almost been suppressed in recent years and had almost no sense of existence in the shadow of Sai City. Azura Path in the northeast. That was also Yang Xiaoxiong's sect. The dazzling sword light pierced straight down. Yang Xiaoxiong raised the long saber in his hand. In the heroic roar, with Yang Xiaoxiong as the center, all the soldiers of the volcano core within a distance of tens of meters were pushed out. The crazy thunderbolts kept gathering in the space of tens of meters. The blade tore the space and went all the way up. The thunderbolt surged into a huge saber light of tens of meters and slashed at Bai Yuming from top to bottom. Tragic, crazy, and domineering. This had always been the essence of Azura Path. The extremely condensed thunderbolts turned into saber radiance, splitting the world and the sword light. The sword energy and the saber radiance collided fiercely. In the loud roar, Bai Yoming's body was lifted into the sky by the huge impact from the bottom up. Her figure was completely stretched in the sky and turned into a graceful white shadow. Elegant, quiet, clear, and otherworldly. The whole battlefield seemed to be quiet for a moment. Only the sword energy swept through the world and surged in all directions. Yang Xiaoxiong raised his head and looked at the extremely beautiful figure in the sky. Lin Yuxian raised his head and felt the sword light that could even make him feel the fatal danger. He narrowed his eyes. Li Beitian stopped, looked at the sky, and whispered, "Oh, Jade Pool!" Above the sky, Bai Yoming's figure flew higher and higher. In the indescribable silence, a group of soldiers of the volcano core couldn't help but charge. As soon as their bodies moved, they were instantly torn apart by the sword energy gathered on the ground. Everyone raised their heads. The dancing figure was the end of all the sword energy. This was the strongest sword move of the 7 absolute swords of Jade Pool. It was also the peak sword move of a half-step invincible realm expert. Bai Yoming's figure paused in the sky for a moment. Her clothes fluttered, the sword edge trembled, and the sword light flew. The tip of the straight soft sword was raised little by little and pointed at Yang Xiaoxiong. Yang Xiaoxiong, whose body was tense to the extreme, held the long saber with both hands and put on a completely defensive posture. Bai Yuming glanced at him. Her figure disappeared in the sky in an instant. The next second, the unimaginable sword energy on the ground kept surging toward the sky. The space seemed to be torn apart. The colorful light was constantly shining in the sky, like rosy clouds. In the rosy clouds, there seemed to be thousands of white shadows flashing constantly. Countless white shadows occupied every direction and every corner, as if there were countless Bai Yuming waving the sword at Yang Xiaoxiong at the same time. That was a completely unimaginable picture. Gorgeous, treacherous, dangerous, fierce. This was the strongest sword move of Jade Pool. It was also known as the most gorgeous sword light in the dark world. In the hands of a half-step invincible realm expert, this sword move perfectly interpreted its name. Jade Pool. Heavenly Fairy. The surging thunderlight was completely shattered in an instant. The saber radiance disappeared inch by inch. Li Baitian narrowed his eyes and seemed to realize that something was wrong. But before he could see clearly, Lin Yuxian beside him suddenly said, F***CK. Before his voice fell to the ground, his figure had suddenly turned into a residual shadow, and his body, like a hurricane, came directly to Bai Yuming. The fierce sword energy suddenly spread and shattered the last saber radiance in Yang Xiaoxiong's hand. Lin Yuxian had half held Bai Yuming and retreated. His face was gloomy and annoyed. He stared at Bai Yuming and said angrily, Do you know what you are doing? Li Baitian froze and wanted to speak, but he held back. Bai Yuming was silent. Without saying a word. Her white clothes had been completely dyed red by blood. 3 huge wounds were still bleeding profusely. One was on the back waist, one on the chest, and the other on the abdomen. The blood was like a fountain, flowing continuously. Bai Yuming's face was pale. She looked in the direction of Yang Xiaoxiong and smiled softly. That smile was extremely sad and desperate. Li Baitian glanced at Yang Xiaoxiong in the distance. Yang Xiaoxiong still stood there, expressionless. Countless blood spots appeared all over his body. From his forehead to his chest to his abdomen, they were all over his body. But each blood spot was very light. For a half-step invincible realm expert, such an injury was not even a flesh wound. Do you know him? Li Baitian frowned and looked at Bai Yuming. Few people in the entire Zhongzhou state could resist the heavenly fairy just now. Bai Yuming's sword could touch Yang Xiaoxiong, which meant that she had the ability to kill Yang Xiaoxiong with every sword move just now. But in the end, her sword only made contact with him for a split second, and her opponent had almost taken her life when she had deliberately held back. Bai Yuming bit her lip and did not speak. In the distance, Yang Xiaoxiong, expressionless, raised his long saber, and his new order spread to the whole area. The order we received was to stop the nightmare troop and prevent them from entering the prison. But now, comrades, there is no turning back. So from this moment on, the order has been changed. Volcano troop. Listen to the order. All charge. Die here with the nightmare troop. Kill. In the soaring roar, countless soldiers of the volcano troop rushed up with red eyes. Bai Yuming wrapped the wound on her body and looked up at Yang Xiaoxiong. Yang Xiaoxiong's eyes were calm and cruel, as before. Bai Yuming laughed again. You take a rest first, No need. Bai Yuming interrupted Lin Yuxian. Let me do it. He looked back at Fairy Tail and said lightly, Give me your weapon. Fairy Tail was stunned and handed over the weapon hesitantly. It was a long saber nearly 2 meters long. Bai Yuming held the hilt of the saber and looked at Yang Xiaoxiong in the distance. Come on, I'll teach you a move. Watch carefully. This move may not be worse than the kendo of your jade pool. She thought of the words in her memory, smiled softly, and said softly, I've learned this move. The saber was held in her hand. Her slender figure carried the huge long saber and moved forward slowly, faster and faster. The huge blade was swung in her hand. Her figure began to charge. From quick-witted to crazy, it was only a moment. Her body and the saber directly collided with the endless group of soldiers of the volcano troop. The blade was raised, and with an indescribable weight, it swung down like lightning. Ah! In the crowd, Bai Yuming suddenly let out a scream that pierced through the sky. The crazy blade suddenly spun wildly in the crowd. All her physical strength, willpower, strength, and speed were gathered together and completely burned in the most crazy and violent way. Invincible realm? Li Baitian's face suddenly changed. The huge blade swept through the crowd with an unimaginable bloody storm, and all who stood in its way were defeated. At this moment, Bai Yuming seemed to have really stepped into the invincible realm. No real breakthrough. Fairy Tail stared at Bai Yuming's figure with a complicated look in his eyes. This is... He smiled bitterly. Azura Path. Taoist Madness. Taoist Madness. The strongest saber of Azura Path, and also the forbidden saber of Azura Path. In the distance, the irrational saber light unscrupulously slaughtered everything and rushed to Yang Xiaoxiong. Along the way, it was like Azura hell. Mutilated corpses were scattered all over the place. The bloody storm rushed into the crowd, killed its way out of the crowd, and almost cleared everything along the way. The storm that was condensed to the extreme suddenly shrank for a moment. The huge blade came to Xianxia. This saber was no longer a hack. It was a forward stab. Xianxia did not dodge. Facing the blade, he took a step forward. Bai Yuming, whose eyes were red and completely irrational, held the long saber and directly cut open Xiaoxiang's chest. His face was gloomy, but he showed a rare smile. Good learning. He looked at Bai Yuming and said with a smile, "You deserve to be my soldier." Bai Yuming's eyes trembled for a moment, and she seemed to regain some clarity. She looked at the man in front of her, closed her eyes and opened them again. "Commander? I'm not your commander anymore," Yang Xiaoxiang whispered. Bai Yuming's palm trembled violently. Yang Xiaoxiang's breath gradually weakened, and he tried to smile. "I like the army very much, but I'm really tired of being a soldier. The question you asked me that year, I don't have an answer. But if there is a next life, Yuming, I will marry you." His body slowly fell with the last voice. Endless thunder spread around him, bringing up yellow sand all over the sky. Chapter 867. Bai Yuming watched Yang Xiaoxiang fall in front of her. The incomparably tyrannical saber radiance penetrated deep into his internal organs, constantly eroding his flesh and blood. Lightning filled the sky with Yang Xiaoxiang as the center. It was a power that he had been accumulating for a long time, but he had never used it in the end. The light continued to spread, rolling over Bai Yuming's body. It was as gentle as that night at the border of Hung State many years ago, when he held her seriously injured and crossed the mountains in the heavy encirclement and returned to the territory of Jianghu State. The lightning isolated the desert from the outside world. The long-condensed power of the half-step invincible realm was dazzling and majestic. Bai Yuming held the knife in her hand tightly and cried loudly in the endless thunder. Yang Xiaoxiang's body was slowly dissipating. He lay on the ground and looked up at the sky through the lightning. The blazing sun was slowly setting. The setting sun lit up the sky, bringing with it a large sunset glow. His eyes were a little dazed, but he appeared extremely calm. "Leader!" Bai Yuming shouted again. The story between her and Yang Xiaoxiang was far from touching. More than a decade ago, the little girl, who had achieved primary success in kendo but had a weak personality, was only 18 years old when she was thrown into the Border Control Corps by her father. That year, Yang Xiaoxiang was 27 years old. Her father stuffed her into the Border Control Corps. He was then transferred to the Thunderbolt Battalion by his uncle, who was the commander of the army. Yang Xiaoxiang was her first guild leader. The 27-year-old commander of the Thunderbolt Battalion of the Border Control Corps could be said to have a promising future. Yang Xiaoxiang was also in high spirits. At that time, Bai Yuming was not a soldier or an officer, but a staff officer of Yang Xiaoxiang's Yinlei group. At that time, Bai Yuming was weak, sentimental, and loved to cry. It was Yang Xiaoxiang, an officer who came from the Prince Group but was valued by the Border Control Corps, who slowly turned her into a soldier. She liked to see him charging forward on the battlefield. She liked to watch him fight with the soldiers in his free time. He liked to see him stand in front of his troops again and again in the face of danger. She liked it even more when he dared to enter the enemy country alone to save his subordinate who had made a mistake because of his subordinate's mistake. His entire body and mind were devoted to the army. At that time, Bai Yuming didn't even dare to confess to him. He was quiet and stable in the Thunderbolt Battalion. From regiment commander, deputy division commander to division commander. He rose to the top of the world. Bai Yuming had always been by his side as his combat advisor. His countless military exploits in the Thunderbolt Battalion made him more and more valued. In the end, Dongqing Wudi personally nominated Yang Xiaoxiang to the army headquarters. Yang Xiaoxiang crossed the threshold of the deputy army and was transferred to the Beijiang military region as the commander of the Volcano Corps. In Bai Yuming's memory, she seemed to have only confessed once. That is, when he was about to leave the Border Control Corps, she drank a lot that day. "Do you like me?" "Yes, I like everyone in the army," Wang Yao said. "That's not what I meant. If I like you then I like you." In my eyes, the most beautiful thing is always in the military. Oh. Let's go. Goodbye. They said goodbye, but never saw each other again. Several years seemed to have passed, or perhaps many years. Bai Yuming didn't think that her first love was a failure. Maybe she had never succeeded, and it was not unforgettable at all. Her life went on, Yang Xiaoxiong's figure faded little by little, and her emotions also faded little by little. She began to appreciate every soldier. The Border Control Corps. The Emperor Dong's palace. The love between men and women seemed to be getting farther and farther away from her, and she did not have the mood to touch it at all. She did not want to see Yang Xiaoxiong again. But she saw him when she least wanted to see him. On the battlefield, the flying fairy was like a dream. His knife stabbed into her body without the slightest hesitation. Thousands of miles of yellow sand, the Taoist crazy demon, bathed in blood. Her knife plunged straight into his chest. Scenes from the past flashed through her mind with incomparable clarity. Bai Yuming raised her hand and wiped away her tears. Yang Xiaoxiong's burly body began to become blurred. Commander. She called him again. Yang Xiaoxiong, whose eyes were calm and without any reluctance, replied. Do you like me? Yes. Yang Xiaoxiong looked at the glow in the sky. The world in front of him began to darken and blur little by little. The desert was getting colder. Yang Xiaoxiong tried to smile. I'm leaving. Goodbye. They never saw each other again. The surging thunder and lightning slowly died out. Yang Xiaoxiong's body turned into flying ashes under the fierce saber radiance. Bai Yuming stood in place. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her pupils were calm without any emotion. Countless soldiers of the Volcano Legion stopped. Their expressions were somewhat sad and incomparably angry, but more than that, they were at a loss. Was this a troop where discipline was more important than anything else? Maybe it was. At least for now, the existence of Yang Xiaoxiong was more important than discipline. The wind and sand disappeared with the last ray of light of the thunder and lightning. The entire volcano core lost its soul. Are you okay? Lin Youxian's figure appeared beside Bai Yuming. I'm okay. Bai Yuming said quietly. But you look like... You don't look good. Lin Youxian smiled bitterly. He didn't quite understand the style of Taoist madness of Azura Path, but it could raise the combat capability of a half-step invincible realm expert to a higher level, so it was impossible that it didn't pay a price. In that monstrous blood wave, Bai Yuming could be said to have torn apart the strongest defense line of the volcano core. She killed the old commander who had trained her personally and even loved her. How could she be okay? I'm in a bad mood. Bai Yuming held the knife in her hand and said in a low voice. Lin Youxian opened his mouth. Someone must be responsible for everything that happened today. Bai Yuming raised her head. She looked in the direction of the desert prison ahead. She was surrounded by a dense crowd. Bang! A gunshot suddenly broke the silence on the battlefield. Deep in the crowd, an officer of the Volcano Corps raised his gun, pointed at Bai Yuming, and shot wildly. His eyes were red, and he was hysterical. Execute the order. Avenge the commander. Execute the order. Yang Xiaoxiong's last order. It was to let everyone in the Volcano Corps die here. Kill. Countless officers rushed over with red eyes at the same time. The officers led the soldiers and rushed over in a more crazy and fierce manner than before. I can die. Bai Yuming said quietly. She raised her hand. The knife in her hand shot to Fairy Tail. Fairy Tail took the knife. The next moment, Yang Xiaoxiong's knife fell into Bai Yuming's hand. The blade was raised, and the blade gleamed with scarlet blood in the sun. It was also Yang Xiaoxiong's blood. It was also Bai Yuming's blood. But can you kill me? Her slender figure took a step forward. The soaring blood suddenly sprinkled into the crowd like a bloody rain. Boom! An earth-shattering roar suddenly came from the distant rear of the volcano core. Bai Yuming rushed into the crowd, unscrupulous and desperate. Lin Youxian suddenly raised his head. In everyone's sight, the sky behind the volcano core had completely turned into a fiery red. It was as if the entire sky was ablaze with unparalleled madness. That was artillery fire. Endless artillery fire occupied the whole sky. At this moment, the Tiger Armored Corps, which had been assisting the Volcano Corps, seemed to suddenly put down all the scruples. Countless artillery fire poured over unscrupulously. On the battlefield, the sky was burning, the corpses were scattered, and the blood was solidified. The scenes were like the end of the world. In the command room of the Tiger Armored Corps, Gu Qianquan, who had rushed back from the front line with a murderous weapon, said coldly, "Continue to fire. I will be responsible for any consequences." Chapter 868. There was no doubt that as one of the trump cards of Beijiang, the ferocious Tiger Armored Corps had the highest firepower and destructive power in the entire Beijiang. The Beijiang military region was not at the level of the Zhongzhou theater of operations, but it was located on the border. It had always been the most sensitive province in the entire territory of Zhongzhou state. Ethnic issues, foreign threats, terrorists. All the hidden factors of unrest existed here. The ferocious Tiger Armored Corps in Beijiang was the main force to deter all kinds of disharmonious factors. Therefore, the ferocious Tiger Armored Corps was not only the trump card of Beijiang. In the entire Zhongzhou state, it could be regarded as one of the top heavy firepower legions. The Nightmare Legion was charging. The formation of the Volcano Legion began to collapse at a speed visible to the naked eye. Without Yang Shaoxiong, the Volcano Legion seemed to have lost its soul. Some of the middle and high-level officers were still fighting with red eyes, but Bai Yuming, who was in a state of madness, had the kind of momentum that could kill anyone who stood in her way. The crazy and barbaric spirit of Azura path of martial arts was displayed vividly in her, a disciple of Jade Pool. The perfect cooperation between Li Beitian and Lin Yuxian drove the entire Nightmare Legion forward. The middle and high-level officers were killed one by one. The orders of the Volcano Legion became more and more scattered, and the soldiers gradually became sober from the initial madness. They felt fear and shadow, and their attack became slower and slower. The Nightmare Legion, which had less than 1,000 people, forced the entire Volcano Legion to retreat. The Volcano Legion could not hold on any longer. Everyone could see the current situation clearly. 10 minutes. 15 minutes. In half an hour at most, the entire Volcano Legion would completely collapse, and the ferocious Tiger Armored Corps would be exposed in front of them. Lin Dongza, the commander of the ferocious Tiger Armored Corps, had been using the long-range precision strike weapon system to assist the Volcano Legion. He did not care about the casualties of the Volcano Legion as Yang Shaoxiong had said. The Volcano Legion and the ferocious Tiger Armored Corps fought together, but the distance between the two bases was the furthest among the several lines of defense, nearly 20 kilometers. Once the Volcano Legion was defeated, the Nightmare Legion had to run for nearly 20 kilometers to get close to the position of the ferocious Tiger Armored Corps. A road of 20 kilometers covered by endless artillery fire would be a real road of death for the Nightmare Legion. According to Lin Dongza's estimation, there would be no more than 200 people who could actually reach his position. By then, the entire Nightmare Legion would have suffered a loss of nearly 10%, and the 43rd Division could completely annihilate the remaining Nightmare Legion. However, when the Volcano Corps was just defeated, Gu Qianquan led several experts of Kunlun City and the elites of the 43rd Army to the command room of the fierce Tiger Armored Corps. The command was taken away in an instant. Gu Qianquan looked at the scene of the Volcano Legion's continuous defeat and cursed them for being useless. Then, he ordered the fierce Tiger Legion to fire with all their might. Countless cannons roared and occupied every corner of the sky. The ferocious Tiger Army was aiming at the battlefield. It was not the Nightmare Legion or the Volcano Legion, but the entire battlefield. Everyone on the battlefield was shrouded in artillery fire. The crazy explosion almost set off the entire desert. This was no longer a battle. Facing the indifferent and merciless cannonballs, the Nightmare Army, the group, suffered the most complete destruction. Retreat! Seeing this scene in the crowd, Lin Yuxian's expression changed dramatically. He suddenly moved forward and pulled back by Yu Ming, who was crazily killing in the crowd. The dragon-shaped sword energy beside him roared in the face of the distant artillery fire. All the experts above the peak of the fire-flaming realm in Emperor Dong's palace attacked with all their might at the same time. Raging fire and thunderbolts broke out in the formation of the Nightmare Legion. They merged with each other and turned into a shield shining with thunder and fire at a speed visible to the naked eye. The shield flickered and shook. In the center of the crowd, Lin Yuxian's face was grim and cold. He shouted, "Full speed charge!" The Nightmare Legion had already thought about what to do in the face of this moment. The only way was to charge at full speed. The Yellow Sand Corps, the Wilderness Brigade. Up to now, the Volcano Legion had broken 4 lines of defense in a row. This was a war between people. In the end, they faced the 43rd Army, Gu Qianquan, and even the murderous weapon. In the end, it was also a confrontation between people. But the fierce Tiger Legion was special. The super long blank distance was a confrontation between martial arts and modern heavy firepower. This was the point in their plan where they would suffer the most losses. 1,000 people fought against the firepower of a heavily armored legion. Yes, in their expectation, 1,000 people fought against a legion. But no one expected that the Volcano Legion would be so tricky. Their losses exceeded expectations. The situation they faced was also unexpected. The madness of the Beijiang military region seemed to be fully revealed. Before the Volcano Legion was completely defeated, the fierce Tiger Armored Legion had already opened fire. What did this mean? The most direct point. When a large number of soldiers of the Volcano Legion hesitated between advancing and retreating, they stood in front of the Nightmare Legion. They would be destroyed by heavy firepower. But at the same time, it greatly slowed down the speed of the Nightmare Legion. This kind of charge was not a charge without obstacles within a certain distance. Every single soldier of the Volcano Legion had become an obstacle. They would resist and even attack their obstacles. Lin Yuxian felt cold all over. The artillery fire covered the sky and set off the desert. The Nightmare Legion moved forward recklessly in the crowd. The pseudo-domain condensed by countless experts turned into a shield that was constantly shining. The first batch of artillery fire smashed down fiercely. One after another, it was like a rainstorm. No one could tell what kind of weapon was in front of them. Everyone's sight was full of fire. Artillery shells. Dense artillery shells were like hailstones. From a long distance, they could even see the thick smoke rising in the direction of the fierce Tiger Armored Legion. Countless artillery fire covered the pseudo-domain of the Nightmare Legion in an instant. The shield formed by the pseudo-domain flashed for a moment. However, it only took 3 to 5 seconds. The positive shield suddenly broke under the artillery fire all over the sky. An endless stream of artillery shells smashed into the formation of the Nightmare Legion. Disperse! Keep a safe distance and charge. Lin Yuxian's voice seemed to be blurred in the artillery fire. He gritted his teeth and stared ahead. Don't look back. Don't look back. Everyone was charging. If they didn't look back, it meant that they were doomed to sacrifice a group of comrades who were injured in the artillery fire but would not die for the time being. Lin Yuxian held the long sword in his hand tightly. His always gentle and calm face was completely distorted, and his eyes were blood red. Kill! Kill them! The bright and dazzling sword light gathered wildly on him. A large number of artillery shells kept exploding around him. The broken flesh, the splashing blood, and the permeating yellow sand covered his body layer by layer. In front of him was still the Volcano Legion with a desperate look. Lin Yuxian's blood-red eyes suddenly became calm. On the battlefield full of flames and smoke, a shining and incredible sword light suddenly appeared. The sword light kept blooming in the crowd with a lot of blood. A terrifying aura rose to the sky with the sword energy. The peak of the thunder-shocking realm. The limit of the thunder-shocking realm. Half-step invincible realm. The dazzling sword light went straight forward in the crowd, as if it could tear everything in the world. The 21st blade. The shattering of land. Lin Yuxian's whole body seemed to have become a sword light. The sword light kept extending higher and higher. The sword energy was mighty, like a torrent running across the world. The artillery fire kept smashing down from the sky in the distance. The Volcano Legion on the ground was crowded together. The sword light flew through the artillery fire and the crowd, moving forward with the style that had shone in the dark world for hundreds of years. Fierce explosions and screams were mixed together. The sword light almost rushed over 100 meters in an instant. All the artillery shells along the way were touched by the sword light, burning and exploding in the air. The Volcano Legion on the ground seemed to be torn apart by a sword. The Nightmare Legion stepped on the passage opened by the shattering of land and moved forward without hesitation. 200 meters. The shining sword light flew all the way to a distance of nearly 200 meters before it slowly stopped. The first wave of artillery fire of the ferocious Tiger Armored Corps finally passed. The Volcano Legion seemed to have completely come to their senses. A large number of soldiers, who had been scared out of their wits, screamed and began to flee. The Nightmare Legion sped up again and kept moving forward. Lin Youxian's figure stopped in the sky, holding a long sword. He looked in the direction of the ferocious tiger army and narrowed his eyes. In a desperate situation, he went from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to the half-step invincible realm in one fell swoop. His aura was still rising, but at a certain moment, it fell back madly. In the headquarters of the ferocious tiger armored corps, Gu Qianchuan almost witnessed the whole scene. His pupils contracted slightly. He stared at Lin Youxian's figure in the air and was silent for a long time. The second wave of artillery fire flew out with a roar. Gu Qianchuan stared at the Nightmare Legion. He twitched the corner of his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Contact General Huang of the Beijiang Corps and ask for fighter jets. I want to see how far they can go." You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.